in 1980, but I don't, like, I'm not so much older.
How are you doing?
No, I'm older.
Wow, that's weird.
So I don't know, but I'm yeah, but I feel kind of more like an Xer. But yeah, like a Y.
Millennial is later. My sister's a Y, and she's 30.
I keep hearing that
not right.
people say that like 1980.
14 times
like,
then?
I don't think so. I don't
Start over.
think so.
1,
These,
2.
like, oh, that I haven't so much had as. Is that really appropriate to say to your boss?
Oh, there's like
No?
sense of hierarchy.
I don't really care if you don't want to do it. I don't care.
That's why
I do a lot of
I'm
things.
doing Zavio. You know what Zavio is?
So we're having this.
Oh, like on your side.
It's turning into a little bit of a shit spiral. And the development director and I were talking, and I said, her name's also Kate, and I said,
Yeah, I mean, caps lock is not on.
what you're gonna do that's
FR1.
but stop asking them and start doing something different. Stop asking them how they want to communicate. Like, no, I don't care if it means you're gonna start.
That doesn't work.
I don't care if you're gonna start, 5-minute meetings every morning. If you're gonna have a priority list for each of them, and you check those top 4 or 5 every day.
Got it.
I don't care if you make a Google Doc that you guys can all check in on. Try something, and if it doesn't work, I'm pretty sure they're going to give you their feedback. So just don't make it. Just do something. Like, read. Just like, should I be a stronger leader? If you had to ask.
Yes, really. Are you happy with me?
I should have came a little earlier.
Love
I
that.
think it'd be a problem.
It's a wonderful organization. It's an extremely stable
Either from our work
organization. That
Been a while, and one meeting is like 6
it's
months.
great sort of.
And I'm always over there.
Yeah.
Reputation is really strong. Books are really strong.
Here they didn't have half this stuff up here.
Charging forward as opposed to Wayne State. Where, this is the other thing that they complain about. Is
I didn't even bring it. I never saw it. You have a
Agenda culture nonprofit.
Kate, oh, you don't have your laptop?
I don't.
Can you get yours? Are you connected to the Wi-Fi?
I was gonna try.
I'm not being able to connect to
I
it.
heard him give a password. I was gonna try that.
I'm
not getting any
You're lucky
love.
if we got 0, because it might mean that if you don't get 0,
He's
might
trying.
get worse.
I don't even have to do anything.
I don't want to hear it, and they're all like, "Really?" Yeah. Basically, I've been at a race in 5 years.
Who's the genius that did the FR?
I know. I hate it. I'm sorry. I'm coming from a public university. You cannot even complain about that to me.
It's FD.
Oh, it's FD, not FR?
It's FD 26 times.
No, it's 13 times.
So we're 26.
Okay, so
So FD.
FD.
Okay, let's try that.
I thought it was
F1, 2,
She asked me. I still remember.
7,
It hasn't been that long.
9,
It has been.
11.
It's been 2 years. Scott's gonna retire.
Conversations going on all around you.
Yeah, how are you?
I was complaining about my lazy staff.
Yeah, that worked.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, like, who came up with that password? It's kind of
Yeah.
the worst password ever.
I've had to re-enter it so many times. I'm like, stop.
It's like, did I hit like the D twice on accident?
Either Sherilyn or Marsha or someone. I don't remember
And I
who
asked
said
her
it
to make
years ago.
changes, and Don said no. And I'm like, well, it's the dumbest password
It really
I've ever
is.
heard.
So we remember it.
Before you,
Yeah, but we'd also remember,
remember
Ferndale with 8s too. All right. Probably should start, huh? Since we're late. Is everyone here that's coming?
are you who we think you are?
Who are you tonight?
You already met her before me. It was because I raced from the other side of town and didn't stop home to get my laptop.
So is Derek being one of the crowd tonight?
Yes.
Okay. All right, you guys good? All right. I call to order the Ferndale December 12th, 2013 meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Azar? Here. Baker?
Here.
Raisin? Here. Forrest? Clark?
Here.
Lawton? Piana?
Here.
Petrino? And Chair Rodiger.
Present. A motion to approve, excuse the missing member?
So moved to excuse the absent.
Second.
Craziest.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, next up, we have approval of the agenda. Any edits or modifications to the agenda? Otherwise, a motion to approve as submitted.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Next up is approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was September 12th, 2013. Does anyone have any edits to the minutes? Otherwise, we'll look for a motion to approve as submitted.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, next up, no old business this evening, so we go right to presentations. I think we have 3 presentations this evening. The first one is the Woodward Complete Streets. So welcome.
Yeah, I'd like to take 2 seconds, if I may, as staff. We're very pleased to be here tonight. We have 3 presentations, which everybody is aware of on the agenda, that are projects and things that the city, or in combination with other agencies, have been working on for quite some time. And we're glad we have the opportunity to bring all 3 of them forward at the same night. The first one, we have Jason Fowler, who is from the Woodward Avenue Action Association, here to present on the Woodward Avenue Complete Streets Master Plan, which is a plan that we've been lucky enough to participate in over the last year or so, or maybe even longer, that received a $750,000 grant to investigate the entire Woodward corridor from Detroit to Pontiac and make recommendations to each community on what are the proposed best practices in relations to complete streets. So this presentation is one that we've been excited to bring forward and glad Jason is here to do. It is our intent that these recommendations, as you will see shortly, are ones that will be incorporated into our multimodal plan and hopefully, as adopted, become part of our master land use plan. So as staff, that is our intent. So as you look at these tonight, please understand that we hope that these recommendations will become part of our transportation plan and our vision for Woodward going forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Jason tonight, and then the next presentations will follow. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. And thank you all for having me this evening. I know your time is short and valuable, so I will try and go as fast as I can. This has been, as Derek mentioned, quite a lengthy process. Again, for those that aren't familiar with the Woodward Avenue Action Association, very simply, we're a nonprofit that's dedicated to preserving, enhancing, and promoting the historic Woodward corridor. And again, my name is Jason. Before I get into complete streets, one of the first questions that I get is, where are we going to put the stops? And I am not here to talk about transit, bus rapid transit, or the M1 rail tonight, although those projects are very symbiotic to all of each other, and we are working closely with each one of those projects. And I can answer some questions about them, but really tonight we're here to kind of talk about complete streets. I have up on the screen a graphic, and you'll notice a lot of the wording in here mentions Transform Woodward, and I will I think touch upon this a little bit later in the presentation, but this was another effort that was created in conjunction with the Michigan Suburbs Alliance to house all of these different studies in a one-stop shop location so that you can learn about each one of the studies and also how they interact. The third component of this is transit-oriented design or development, which I'm sure you've probably heard before, and I think this is a really good axionometric that kind of shows how the 3 main concepts interact with each other. The transit-oriented development really has to deal with zoning ordinances and the private realm, so the property line, and what we're talking about tonight, and you'll see the bus rapid transit or light rail, enhanced rapid transit we call, would be located somewhere in the right-of-way, and I like to say that we're sort of filling in the gaps of everything else in that right-of-way. I won't bore you by reading this with this very dry language, but I always like to show this slide to show that complete streets isn't just sort of a marketing concept that we've come up with, but it is actually a a planning term, and it has been adopted by the state of Michigan and by many municipalities.
Like the city of Ferndale.
Like the city of Ferndale, thank you, that complete streets principles really be incorporated into not just locally but statewide any type of development initiatives that will be going forward from this point on. Here are some of the tools. Another question I frequently get is, oh, this is a bike lane study. While yes, that is a part of our study, Complete Streets is very much making it safer and more accessible and really more lively for everybody that uses the road. So that includes children going to school, those less able, pedestrians, bicyclists. And here are just some of the tools that we can use to make that better for everyone that utilizes the street. As Derek mentioned, really the communities that are involved in the Woodward Avenue Action Association really came to us and said, you know, how can we enhance the rapid transit and the studies that are going on, and really investigated this Complete Streets concept and wrote a grant to the Federal Highway Administration, and were awarded in the summer of 2011 $752,000 to prepare this master plan for the entire Woodward corridor. And those goals, as I touched upon a little bit before, is improving safety for everyone, to encourage people to get out and experience the street aside from their car. That has the benefit of being more healthier, lowering transportation costs, improving the community. A real strong component of Complete Streets is the philosophy of placemaking, that by improving all of this accessibility and image, that we're really starting to create a place and not just a roadway. We like to use the catchphrase, creating place, not lanes. And by doing all that, that has a trickle-down effect of starting to enhance the economic competitiveness of the corridor, the economic development, and eventually trickling down into the neighborhoods, improving property values. So as I mentioned, the plan spans for the entire corridor. It's 27 miles, there we are in Ferndale right there. Our task, number one, after we were rewarded the grant, was to form what we call steering group. And that is comprised of a member from each municipality, special interest groups, major institutions, really anybody that has a concerted interest in the Woodward corridor. And of course, our wonderful partners at MDOT, SEMCOG, and M1 Rail is a very important component. So one of their first tasks was putting together a competitive RFP process. And from that process, we selected our project lead team is Parsons Brinkerhoff, an internationally and locally renowned planning and engineering firm. I think their history dates back, they were originally the firm that designed the New York subway system. So really great expertise. We also had the added benefit of them they had done the study on the Woodward Light Rail, and are currently also doing the alternatives analysis, which is studying the bus rapid transit. Their sub-consultants are, again, both locally and nationally renowned design and engineering groups. I'd like to point out particularly the Walkable and Livable Communities Institute. That is headed up by a man named Dan Burden, and we were really, really lucky to have him because he's been around for 30 years. He does this worldwide, and he's pretty much written the book on walkability and complete streets. So before I get into public engagement, one of their first tasks was to really start to compile all the data along the corridor. That includes local master plans, other local planning efforts, state plans, regional plans, county plans, plans for MDOT. Really bring all that together, because we don't want this process to be dictatorial. So we really want to incorporate each one of the community's goals, objectives, and desires. Compiled with that, then we had focused stakeholder groups with focused, like for Beaumont, I believe we sat down with the Ferndale DDA, groups like that to get their input on what they'd like to see. We then rolled out what I like to think of kind of an innovative public engagement plan. That was stakeholder meetings on the top that I just spoke about. But we also developed what we called charrettes. And we split the corridor up into 5 different segments. In each one of those segments, we held a 3-day charrette where the consultants were there pretty much from 9 until sometimes 7 at night, where anybody and everybody could come in, interact with the consultants, see what they were doing, ask them questions, and really fill out surveys, and really have a multitude of ways of interacting and giving input on what they were doing and what they'd like to see in the corridor. There was also some basic presentations, and then some really neat what we called walking audits. And that's, again, where Dan Burden, essentially, we went on a walk. We walked down Woodward, then through some of the neighborhoods, and really just, he pointed out things that really worked and things that maybe needed some improvement, and things, you know, that that weren't working at all, frankly. But these were things that you and I probably walk by every day and don't realize, oh, well, that's why I don't feel very comfortable here, or, oh, that's why I like this corner. So very simple, but very interactive and very educational. So as with the walking audit, same thing, but on bikes. We also have our digital presence, which, again, is the website, transformwoodward.com. Our social media, Twitter and Facebook, and we also developed a mobile application, which you can download for free for your smartphone via iPhone or Android, and it has ways of connecting with us, learning about the project. You can, again, take a survey, contact us directly, but a really neat interactive map where it's Google-based and you can zoom in, tab around, and then you can just tap on any different location. Dialog box pops open, says, what do you think about this location? And you can send us, you know, I like this restaurant, or it feels really dangerous to cross here, really anything that you want, and it's, you know, geographically specific. And all of this information goes to the team, and all this information, again, will be sort of synthesized, gone over, and incorporated with the eventual plan. I touched a lot about on these. The thing that I didn't mention was community image survey, which essentially we pasted pictures up all along the walls and gave people stickers. So put a red sticker on those images that you don't like, put a green sticker on those that you do like. And these are the 2 images that people liked the most, and then these are the 2 images that people disliked the most. And you'll notice it's not because people don't like the zoo, but you can see people with strollers in the roadway there. And it's very hostile for people to walk to the zoo. And part of this survey is we're also doing traffic counts to make sure that all of our recommendations will work also for the automobile. Because we're not here to take anything away from people that drive. We're just here to add things in for everybody else. So with this case in particular, the studies, the traffic counts prove that currently, and also 30 years down the road, we don't need that 3rd lane of traffic. So something very quick and very easy we can do is close that 3rd lane and expand the pedestrian access across that bridge. Just a lot of words on some of the findings, but I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Make it easier to cross Woodward, make better facilities for people that don't have cars on Woodward. So we've come up with recommendations, including which a road diet, and this reduction will provide the opportunity for transit-only lanes, bigger sidewalks, bicycle facilities, a lot of those tools that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So through some of that feedback, and this isn't necessarily representative of what we're proposing, but I wanted to show this image to show the level of detail that we're kind of getting into, and trying to solve some of the issues. We see at this intersection right here, there's currently a turnaround. Oops, sorry, laser pointer seems to be dying. There's a turnaround there, which makes it, people are looking for traffic on southbound Woodward, but not looking for pedestrians crossing that street there. I think we spoke with the Ferndale Police Department, actually said that there has been a fatality at that corner because of that. So looking at ways to try and remedy that and try and fix little issues like that. A lot of our more national folks really didn't get the Michigan turnaround. However, we all know everybody loves the Michigan turnaround here. So that they proposed direct lefts on Woodward, and that pretty much resoundingly fell flat. So you won't see this again. But I just wanted to point out kind of some of the improved facilities proposed that we went into. With the bus rapid transit, you'll see in your the draft document that a lot of the cross sections that we're proposing, we're showing that the bus rapid transit is going down the median. And again, we're showing that because that is the most difficult option to plan around. We don't know what the bus rapid transit will look like just yet, but if it does look like that, then we're one step ahead of the game. If it looks like something else, then we have a little bit easier work to do. But a lot of people ask, well, if it is in the middle, how do you keep the Michigan lefts? And this is kind of a solution right here that you'll see. Cars will pull up in the stacking lane instead of pulling all the way around to stop at southbound. They'd stop before the turn, let the bus pass, the light would turn green, and then they would proceed on. And this particular solution integrates some of those improved pedestrian crossings, which is it's a mid-block crossing, and that little jog there has a purpose, and that's so that when you cross the street and then you turn to that jog, you're then facing traffic, so you see if there's traffic coming automatically. So little fixes, little things like this that we think will go a long way. So we'll get into how that looks in this section. This is your existing street condition in Ferndale. You see 6-foot sidewalk, 4 travel lanes, very wide median. And then, again, here is our proposed condition. Again, the median running won't necessarily be that, but we're showing it there. You see the reduced, taking away 1 travel lane, maintaining the parallel parking. You'll notice on each side of the road we have, instead of just a one-direction cycle track, a dual-direction cycle track. The thinking behind this is that crossings along the Woodward corridor for bicyclists are kind of so few and far between that this works to alleviate that problem, where you can go either direction on either side of the street instead of having to bike one way half a mile up, cross over, then bike half a mile back to get to the shop that you're trying to get to, essentially. And you'll also see much drastically wider sidewalks to facilitate things like fire hydrants, more greenery, maybe sidewalk cafes, make it easier to enter shops.
Jason, can I ask a question while you've
Certainly.
got that up?
Absolutely.
Do you know how wide that is?
16?
16?
No.
The green?
The existing median?
No, how
No,
big
the-
would the
the-
green space
green
be?
space would be
The pedestrian refuge outside of the BRT, how big would that be?
26 on each side.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
This is-
76 total is 24 for the median. Or
That's-
24 for travel lanes for bus. Meaning 76 total, you subtract 24, 12 feet in each direction.
So then this scale's all wonky then.
The median
This
here's
is
like
15
36.
And that's 26?
Yeah.
That's not
No.
our median, that's gotta be Royal Oaks median then.
Okay.
Ours is only 46 feet.
Well, again, these are draft concepts, so this is proposing to, again, taking out the median, replacing it with bus rapid transit, then making the median a little bit smaller. Since this, we have heard that Ferndale is very passionate about maintaining the median like it is. So we probably wouldn't, if the bus
I wasn't
rapid...
even going to go there yet. I was just wondering.
But currently what is shown is that it would be 12 feet per lane for bus rapid transit, so that would leave 12 feet left over, so 6 feet on either side.
No. For Ferndale, the two options are to center run the 2 lanes of bus rapid transit. You center run it through the median. You end up with 26 green space, 24 for bus rapid transit, and then 26 again for median. For a total of 76. If you outside edge run, you You go 12, 52, 12.
We would shave off a little bit of the
24 feet
Yeah.
from the 76.
Okay.
Which would still leave us with 52 feet, and for comparisons, the median in Royal Oak total right now is only 46.
Okay.
So we would still have 6 feet more, regardless if you take that 24 down the center or 12 on each exterior. You
Right.
still end up with 52 feet of median.
Right, but that wouldn't allow for the 25 feet of sidewalk on each side and the 15.
Yeah,
Correct.
Because technically, what is being considered and what is the final recommendation, at least the Complete Streets and the Bus Rapid Transit, is if you take the Bus Rapid Transit lanes out of the median, it still allows you to drop curbside lanes and go to 3 travel lanes in each direction instead of 4. So where you pick up the curbside space is you can drop an exterior curbside lane without impacting level of service.
MDOT says so?
What?
MDOT says so?
Well, right now, level of service stays D. By the AA analysis, you go from a level of service D to D. So
Okay.
It doesn't impact level of service. And that's without messing with light timing or any other improvements. If you take the Bus Rapid Transit and put it in the median, the outside, the lanes, curbside of the median, you eliminate the possibility of expanding your sidewalks, because then you go to 3 travel lanes on the exterior, the curbside, and then there's no room for future expansion of the sidewalk.
Okay.
And I think staff, me and city manager and others have prioritized wider sidewalks and
Yeah.
cycle tracks, and
Thank
then
you.
figuring out where the bus rapid transit
Yeah,
lane
we've
should
been
be.
blessed with a median that's 76 feet wide.
Can you go back to the last slide for just a second that has the existing conditions?
That allows for the reduction of the median by 24 feet for the Bus Rapid Transit lanes, and leaves us 52 feet of median green space for landscaping, and then allows for, if we can demonstrate to MDOT, the level of service stays the same, allows us to take the reduction in travel lanes, not for Bus Rapid Transit,
But for
but
the
for
sidewalk.
cycle track and pedestrian expansion on curbside. So whether you center run the 24 feet or you run it lane edge on the median, we've asked the AA people to tell us which one's faster. I think, there's a debate whether it should be center run or whether it should be, the 24 feet should be taken out the exterior edge of the median or center run through the middle. But right now, I think we've all kind of agreed that if that's possible, and that allows us to reduce travel lanes to expand pedestrian spaces, instead of taking away a travel lane for Bus Rapid Transit, that allows us more options going forward. We'd like them to commit to both at the same time. I mean, I think that, but it's 2 separate approval processes. One is through the feds for Bus Rapid Transit, the other one is through MDOT for
Sidewalks and lane
complete
reduction.
street improvements. In the Complete Streets Plan, I think, and Jason's going to get to it, I'll show you what we recommend for those curbside lane improvements, and why it's important to maintain the ability to do that without having to go to 2 travel lanes in each direction. Sorry.
So if we go back to what's proposed, so that necessarily isn't 100% accurate on
No.
what we talked about then, because it would be wider than 36 in the middle,
Correct.
under either option.
Yes.
52. So again, so that obviously would take out.
From the cross sections that are recommended, we'd have 24 and 52.
After getting nearly run over by a streetcar on St. Charles in New Orleans recently, I'm just really interested in pedestrian refuge.
And with the, again, this really depends, the integration and the interaction between the 2 projects, the timing is really going to be key along here, because this obviously is hinging on what the Bus Rapid Transit proposes, and then we can go back and then design around it. So what we're doing now is trying to get as much feedback as we can on the concepts that we're showing here, so that we can have all that documented, so that we can then move forward to integrate, take BRT's recommendation and then plan around that with all of our Complete Streets recommendations.
And just since I really don't know, when do we expect recommendations for the BRT?
The public, sorry, Mel, you can.
I was going to say, last night was the last public outreach meeting on the development of the plan. We should see something, a final one.
They're looking at March.
and then it will go to the RTA. The cities really don't have, I'm sure we'll say something in support or against it, or voice our opinions of what we don't like, but largely the cities don't have any say over the final plan of getting it approved.
Yeah, the AA deals with primarily mode and route. And depending on what pot of funds you dip into from the FDA for the installation determines what the next steps are and then how the engineering phase goes. But the engineering will probably make the final determination on the details, the stops, everything else.
Yep.
This will mostly just decide route and mode, whether it's rail, bus rapid, curbside, not curbside, and then the details come. The AA has been significantly more detailed than I anticipated, but I think most of the details, the finalization will come
Right.
if we're funded.
We'll be funded. I'm optimistic, but I think a lot of the questions we're getting from the public have been about the details that would come through engineering.
Yeah.
And personally, I have a preference, but I'm not sold yet on it completely because the engineering has to take in consideration some the left, the Michigan left, and that determines, depending on where the lanes are, that can improve pedestrian safety if we design it right. So, I don't know. I'm on the fence.
Okay.
More detail needed.
Thank you.
So if we then put together sort of all these recommendations and move forward, this is looking north here in Ferndale. When we start to do gradual improvements and you start to see these layered in, I'd like to point out that a part of our master plan is going to be give phased recommendations. So we're going to have everything from those things that are low-hanging fruit that you can do with low cost, all the way up to sort of major infrastructure improvement, sort of 30 years down the road. Most people say, well, 30 years down the road, I'm not going to see that ever. But, some of these low-hanging fruit, you can actually already see it through our great partnership with MDOT during the repaving of Woodward between 10 and 14 Mile Road. Instead of doing just the 2 lines for crosswalks, we were able to work with them to get the white blocks, or what we call zebra striping, which improves visibility and denotes where people are crossing, which makes it that much safer. And it's just an example of a little thing that can go a long way. So we start to see, you can add in the bike lanes. You got curb bump outs here for a mid-block crossing, the wider sidewalks, taking away a lane. Then when the bus rapid transit comes along, add in that mid-block crossing with a signal, which then hopefully will result in that trickle-down effect of eventually, mature trees and increased development down the road. No pun intended. So what comes next? Really, I think we've kind of touched on that a lot, but the reason I'm here tonight is to really get your feedback and encourage anybody and everybody in your community really to take a look at the plan and let us know if what they like. They like what we're seeing, what we're doing, or we're on the completely wrong track, because really the people in the community are the most important step in this, because we don't want this to be a plan that just sits on a shelf gathering dust. We want this to truly reflect how people want to see Woodward in the future. And really, MDOT, again, has been wonderful to work with, and they are gung-ho about this and ready to go. But they will do the most cost-effective solution unless communities ask for it. So I'm here to ask you to hopefully comment and hopefully down the road ask for it. So, and how you can do that is, again, contacting us via any number of the ways that I went over. And here's all the contact information. Again, the website, the email, comment on Facebook, comment on Twitter, or via the mobile application. So with that, I'll open it up to any general questions or comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Look, I think it sounds like a lot of my colleagues are heavily involved in a lot of the things that are going on and probably know much more about it than I do. But I don't know that I have any specific questions. I'm at the website right now. Is there a draft plan for review?
Yes,
I'm not seeing it
if you go to transformwoodward.com, you'll see the 3 different icons. The Complete Streets is all the way to the left. Click on that. That'll take you to the Complete Streets page.
It must not be loading properly on this because there's nothing. There's transit-oriented and alternatives analysis, nothing for Complete Streets.
It's a green square. You should scroll to the right. Maybe it's not loading correctly on that.
Detroit Complete Streets Biking Tour.
On the homepage?
Something's
Yeah.
not loading.
Yeah, it's not loading properly. I don't know if it's an Apple thing or my thing or
This is fine.
a me thing. I don't know, but I got nothing. Okay, so
Yes,
I'll
if
use
you're
another
able.
device and see if I can find it.
Yes, if you're able to get there, go to the Complete Streets page. When you click on that green square, it'll be just a Complete Streets page. And on the left, you'll see a little gray dialog box on the left that says Information Center. Click on that, and you can download the plan in its entirety or just your section of the corridor to print out and review. I will also be posting a lot of the presentations that I've been giving this far, so if you really want to get bored and learn more about this.
Okay, I got it now.
Oh, good.
I could just maybe switch my whatever.
Oh, good. Yes, there's even there's a YouTube video, I believe, of the Ferndale closing presentation. All 200 slides.
The Streets Advisory Committee, I mean, for the Woodward corridor of the complete section, the complete streets cross section, and Jason can correct me if I'm wrong, this portion of the plan dealt with everything other than the BRT and where the final BRT routing will be. But it basically amounts to a 3-lane cross section in each direction, buffered cycle tracks, which if you're not familiar with a cycle track, it is actually a bike lane that would be dropped in between the exterior travel lane and parallel parking. So you would have a bike lane buffered by the parking lane. And then any additional space would be given to the pedestrian on the sidewalk area. And that's, in short, I believe, the recommendation for Woodward from 8 Mile to 696. Would be to go 3 travel lanes in each direction, that cycle track on each side of Woodward that ducks behind the parallel parking, and then expanded sidewalk space, which we all know we need desperately. So, and then any BRT function would be taken out of the median, 24 feet out of the median.
Yes. Essentially, and we're also
Simplistic version of it, and many more mid-block crossings.
mid-block crossings study.
Mid-block crossings, not just running across the street.
Yeah.
And they've had final locations identified in the plan, but one of the biggest complaints and one of the biggest concerns we have is bridging that divide between the east and west sides of Woodward. And we feel by narrowing the actual distance, adding the cross sections, adding this mid-block crossing, you accomplish that at great length. Even by narrowing the median, and you even in perception, you achieve a less of a divide, that cavernous space between each side of the city. So, in essence, that's what the recommendation is.
And we'll also be looking at smaller detail. We'll focus very heavily on also the intersections, how people get across the street at intersections, also how bicyclists get across at the intersections, so improving crossings that way. Also integrating with any type of bike lanes or east-west connections. So focusing on making sure that, again, we bridge the gap that now is perceived as Woodward and start to bring both sides of the street together, bringing it a lot closer in. But I think, in Ferndale, a lot of people tell me how much they want to be like Ferndale. And really, Dan Burden was here and did West 9 Mile. The Complete Streets recommendations for West 9 Mile. So West 9 Mile is, 95% of the way there. And even the little things, according to him, just missing trees is what he said. He told me. But even little things that, I never even noticed, but how your parallel parking, about how the parallel parking is sloped and the drainage is still on the street. So that means that when you get out of your car, you never step in a puddle. So little design details like that will be given a lot of consideration.
Sometimes step in giant snow piles. But
And the mid-block crossing. You know, and the mid-block crossing you have on West 9 Mile is a great example with the curb bump out, so that you're not diving in between parked cars to see if anybody's coming. You can actually step to a curb. You know, connecting to neighborhoods between buildings. So everything, you know, curb cuts, the whole 9 yards, little details like that. But in essence, bringing Woodward in, making it function better for everybody.
I'm just curious, in terms of the process, I know there's various public meetings, just how was the turnout, just in general, and Ferndale compared to other communities? If there was any notice at all.
That's a good question. The Ferndale meeting was the first one back in April. So I'm trying to recall. Ferndale was pretty well attended. Our intent really was to, again, bridge the divides of Woodward. So we split up, we did it North Detroit, so 6 Mile all the way up to Pleasant Ridge to try and tackle that, the 8 Mile bridge. So to try and bring the communities together and see how we could bring that together.
Actually, I was at that meeting. There were probably 50, at least probably 50 residents or non-staff over there.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the total attendance. Yep. Yep, St. James.
Oh, that was Dan Burden Day, right?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been a series of meetings. All of them were reasonably well attended. Better than I would have thought. Better than I've seen it.
Yeah, the one at the church was a lot of people. It was not just, you know, all of us. Which was
Good.
nice.
I mean, it's hard with the AA, with
Yeah, there's a lot.
with everything else. There's been a lot of talk amongst both steering committees of public meeting burnout, and how to avoid that. But I think we were in a good position to go first. I think we were reasonably well attended. I mean, you always hope more people come, but other than the choir, other than the people who had to be there, I think things were.
I mean, people trickled in and out, but I mean, just from what I saw, I would say, you know, at any given time, there were 40 to 50 non-staff.
Yeah, it's really good.
And definitely from each of the 3 communities. I mean, there were Pleasant Ridge, Ferndale, and Detroit,
That was really the nice part about this one. Is there was a real cross section of people with different interests.
which was cool.
It centers around the 8 Mile bridge, obviously,
Right.
but it was a nice process.
Well, and actually, we did Pleasant Ridge with Royal Oak and Huntington Woods to try and bridge the ditch.
Bridge the ditch. My mother is partially responsible for that ditch.
And I'm just curious, as part, I know obviously you want to respond to individual areas, you know, wants and desires. I know at one time in the Bloomfield Hills area, there was an anti-sidewalk sentiment completely. Has that been improved upon, or is there still an anti-sidewalk sentiment up in that area?
It depends on who you talk to.
I just don't know if we've made any progress in bridging the gaps of making a continuous.
We have.
They were less excited about equitable design than the rest of the communities maybe involved.
Well, from the general public that attended our workshop says, I can't even take my baby in the stroller on a walk anywhere. I would die for a sidewalk. To a couple of elected officials, they no way, no how, never. So it's, you know, we really got a cross section. I like to tell people, you know, generally our surveys, the most popular response is make it easier to cross Woodward, make Woodward safer. And the thing that people are least interested in is keeping Woodward the same and to add more parking.
How do they feel about, how does the general public feel about the idea of narrowing Woodward?
I think after
I like it.
an average, it's funny because it skews with age. You know,
Right.
Younger people doesn't seem to matter too much too, and you know, the opposite end, it's a large concern. But really, when we talk about we're looking at the corridor holistically. So we're proving through those traffic counts, not just today, but 30 years down the road, that what we're doing will work. We're also doing things like, looking at traffic calming, so you have a consistent speed along the corridor, looking at timing the traffic lights, so you have consistent, so it's not 40 here, 50 here, 35 here, stop, go. We've actually proved that you'll actually drive a little bit faster by taking away a lane and doing all these other different things. Also by increasing rapid transit, which I'm sure you know the trends are showing that both youth and the aging population are going to gravitate towards. You start to take traffic off of the streets, so you start to decrease that rush hour congestion. So after I go through all that explanation, it's kind of like, well, okay.
I wish there was somewhere nearby that we could put like our really, really active seniors group on a bus and take them to, and be like, walk in this neighborhood or cross this street and see this is what it could be like. But we're in Michigan, so what's MDOT's response then to the idea of narrowing roads?
MDOT's fine with it.
They're what?
Fine.
MDOT's fine with it?
Yeah, like I said, MDOT has been really amiable, and we've been working very closely with them and M1 Rail to introduce, M1 Rail obviously is going to start rebuilding the road here any day now, and they didn't really take a lot of these recommendations into consideration. So now we're working, and MDOT is really pushing a lot of what we've found, like the mid-block crossings and doing, raised pedestrian refuges in the median, which we're getting a lot of pushback from, but MDOT is very clearly on our side.
Yeah, well, in theory, the folks from MDOT who sit on steering committees and stuff are different than the engineers who work at the transportation service centers who are interested in level of service and delay times and those types of things. The thing we have going for us in Ferndale that the rest of the corridor will struggle with is, and Norm and Jason both know this, is north of 696, the average daily traffic is about 65,000 cars. South of 696, you drop almost 25,000 vehicles a day, which allows us to make the argument that even with the reduction in lane, at the worst case scenario, there is no impact to level of service, which to even the MDOT traffic engineers is kind of the vernacular speak where you have to reach for capacity analysis. In a meeting, you can get anybody to agree with anything in theory, but then you have to show that from a capacity analysis standpoint that you're not going to impact level of service. And we really strongly believe that at least between the 8 Mile and 696 sections of Woodward, that you can reduce a lane without not only talking the talk, but you can prove it with engineer speak. That the level of service won't be reduced, and that's without impact, that's without messing with signal timing or anything else. That's just a straight calculation on number of cars and number of lanes. You don't have a negative impact on level of service. So we're actually encouraged that when it comes to it, not only can we, in theory, discuss it, but that from even by today's current standards, that there would be a very difficult time arguing from a capacity analysis that we shouldn't be allowed to do it. Funding is a completely different animal, and when is Woodward going to be redone? Is it going to be done as part of the BRT? If it's done, that's obviously the bigger question. But we think from a capacity analysis standpoint, we can make a legitimate argument as to the level of service not being impacted.
And 2 points I'd like to make. Our recommendations are, there is no one size fits all. It's an excellent point. Actually, between I think 12 and a half and 14 and a half, we aren't able to take away a lane. So Woodward will still maintain 4 travel lanes, and that's simply because that's the highest traffic volumes on the road. Secondly, in regards to funding, part of the study will identify potential sources for funding. It will largely fall in MDOT's lap. However, there's a lot of grants out there. There's us that can leverage federal funds. But we have, like Derek said, some exciting projects coming up. So if the BRT moves forward, then we can incorporate this with that project. Also, a silver lining of the talk of expanding I-75 a lane is that a part of that will be to do some remediation. So what do you do with the traffic while they're building that? And that will ultimately fall into Woodward, which means that Woodward will get a lot of that money to then start incorporating a lot of these things. So I know it's not a great project and it's not 100%, but that's kind of how these things work, is that add something here, well, we'll get a little money to add in here. So it's not, it's not like, again, it's not like we won't ever see this in our lifetime. There is hope and there is potential.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, I thank you for coming and filling us in, and obviously it's something that this commission and City of Ferndale support, so we're excited to see the results and see the implementation within the next 30 years, which is within all of our lifetimes. So. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, and please encourage everybody to take a look and give us feedback, and again,
will do.
Thank you.
It'll be permeable pavement then, right, Jared? It'll be permeable pavement then, right?
So our next presentation is Ferndale Moves.
Yeah, Norm, if you want to step up, I'd like to introduce a couple people specifically. Norm Cox is with the Greenway Collaborative, and he's been the consultant in charge of this project since we got started. I don't know if this is working, but in addition, I'd like to introduce Hannah Kelly, who's sitting to my right immediately. Hannah's been working with us as a planning assistant for several months now, and has really been in charge of this project. She's the one that's taken the lead on it. She's been the direct contact with Norm for the community and with the advisory committee as well. So we are now to a point, we've been sending out emails and updates in relation to the project for some time now, but it's gotten to the point where we felt it was appropriate to bring it to the Planning Commission, to do a brief presentation on where we're at, and then get any feedback from you. I think as the Planning Commission is aware, this project is intended to be the city's transportation plan going forward. It deals with almost all of the roads in the city and potential future cross-sections, projects, and how the road system should be designed in the city, with the goal of creating a more equitable design in transportation. We've been using that word for quite some time and continue to do so. It deals with not only vehicle transportation or vehicle design, it deals with bicycle, pedestrian, transit, and the modes that connect all of them. And we are trying rather diligently to design a system that not only is idealistic for all modes of transportation, but something that's implementable as well. And we're rather encouraged at this point that we're achieving that goal. The other unique portion of this project is that at the very beginning we discussed the idea of how to do something slightly different with a plan. And to that end, our idea was, instead of adopting a paper plan, was to adopt a website and have it be an interactive, living document that not only deals with the planning portion of it and what we're recommending, the implementation and the proposed network, but that would also be a vehicle to move projects from the planning stage to the design stage, to the funding stage, to the construction stage. And I know it's a overused term, but to be a one-stop shop for transportation in the city of Ferndale. Again, we're cautiously optimistic that we're reaching that goal. In part to a lot of work by the Greenway Collaborative, and I do want to say right off the bat that the entire website to this point has been designed and constructed by Hannah. She has done it on a part-time basis and built it. Into the website itself has been incorporated a interactive public comment component called Community Remarks, which does allow, as we go forward, the community in real time, residents and others, to comment on the not only the network, but to make comments on where else we should be looking, where there's issues. And we're hoping going forward that this will be a tool we can use to have residents and the public comment on not only what the plan is, but as projects move forward into design and construction phase, to continue that dialogue in relations to projects. So with that, I think Norm is going to do the presentation, and then Hannah will also be here to answer any questions about the website and what we intend with that going forward. So by way of a rather long introduction, I'll turn it over to Norm here. So thank you.
And please jump in, you two, as we go forward.
Got anything to add, Hank, before we go? Sure?
Take it away, Norm.
Derek said everything. Any questions? No. Appreciate your time tonight. This started out as the Ferndale Multimodal Transportation Plan, and we decided this is Ferndale, and we just couldn't live with such a title. So working with our steering committee, it became Ferndale Moves, because that's really what this project's about. It's about opening up transportation options. It's about improving safety, whether you're driving, walking, taking the bus, or bicycling. And it's also very much about placemaking, about when we do these things, making and enhancing the quality of the community here and making it an even more attractive community. And I have to say that you have a phenomenal starting point. We're not used to coming to communities and bicycling down your bike lanes and using your nice crosswalks. And everything that you've done remarkable work over the years, and we applaud it. You already are a very walkable bicycle community. You have a vibrant downtown, a very compact community with a nice network of streets. You have diverse land uses. You have, as I said, built a lot of pedestrian and bicycle facilities. You have a very solid sense of place. You have things that so many communities are striving to create. You have that foundation already there. Add to this fact that you have a lot of road projects on tap, so we can begin to integrate these things very economically over time. These ideas are not just going to be pie in the sky. We tried to make this very pragmatic. These ideas can very much be implemented cost effectively in the near future. So we see that you have the potential to very quickly and economically transform yourself, not just to a very good walkable and bikeable community, to a model community that people will look to and say, this is the way to do it. And I think you have that potential here. What have we done on the project so far? I think Derek kind of gave an overview, but we really started up here in July. We did an inventory and analysis looking at all your existing conditions, things from crashes, etc. We did a web survey. We got 251 responses. I think Derek alluded to this earlier. One thing when we started out this project we are really worried about is burnout of public participation with all the things going on in Woodward. So we really tried to use some alternative ways to get public input, not try to ask people to show up to yet another 2-hour evening meeting. Are there other ways to get input? Our steering committee meetings, we met mostly monthly. Councilmember Piano's been on there and showing up to our Friday morning meetings, and I'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock for our update of the steering committee. It's been a great group to work with, a lot of good input, a lot of good direction. It's been a great working relationship. Hannah has put together the project website that we've been populating with data, and we are now at the point where we have a preliminary network plan that's been under review, and this is kind of the physical proposed improvements. And currently, what we're doing is we will be meeting Monday over at the high school and doing a walk. Now, we did a lot of the Dan Burden type ideas of the walking audits and the bicycling audits to kick this thing off. Now we're going to do it with, okay, let's walk around and look at the places where we're talking about doing a crossing improvement. This is what's in the plan, this is here, and be able to kind of see what's out, and look at the actual improvements at that location. So that'll be Monday afternoon. We'll be continuing to get input from our interactive web maps throughout the year. We'll be refining the plan based on what we're hearing. We're working right now on an implementation plan, phasing and costs, how are we going to build this, and we'll also be finalizing some policies and programs, the things that will actually help people change existing travel behaviors. And once we build it, how do we get people to actively start using it, changing those long established travel patterns where everyone's just used to getting into your car for that 10-minute trip. How do we kind of change that pattern? Derek said this is kind of something different. At the very beginning, the things we kept hearing from staff and the steering committee was, we want this plan to be very accessible to the citizens and to the professionals alike. We don't want something that just sits on the shelf. We don't want a static plan. We want to be able to continually engage the community through implementation. So if this is the big picture, and then you're down to a particular roadway, how do we keep that public process going? How does someone make a request for a bike parking location, or say, issue maybe a complaint that the push button's not working? How do we kind of integrate that into this? Creating a living document. Bicycle and pedestrian and transit planning is a rapidly evolving field. New research is rolling out constantly, new guidelines are being developed, so we want to be able to take advantage of this dynamic nature. So your plan is not typical. You're not going to get a PDF, you're going to get a website, and we're still trying to figure out how you're going to adopt a website, but that's, I guess, one of the hazards of breaking some new ground. This is kind of a quick look at, and I'll just step you through very quickly what the website looks like. You start out with a quick overview and what's new about the project. It has a lot of the background information. We have the existing condition maps. And I'll say one thing we try to do with this project, typically we do all of our GIS maps, our computerized mapping things, in specialized software and published maps. We did everything from the get-go on Google Maps. So the public sees what we see. You have the access to the same kind of information we're doing. So if you go to existing conditions, you could pull up these maps, kind of see what's there. If you want to see what a line is, you click on a line and say, hey, okay, this is the road, here are the traffic volumes, some of the things that are going on there. So people could get the same level of information that we're doing. One thing that was key was dealing with the idea of a corridor stress. Whether you're driving a road, bicycling, or walking, we said, well, there's different level of roadways. You know, we just heard about Woodward. You know, if you're biking down Woodward, you want the protected cycle track. If you're crossing Woodward, you want that light stopping traffic. If you're down a residential road, well, you can mix with traffic and you don't need anything really fancy for your crosswalks. And then there's a bunch of in between. So we kind of categorized your roads and began to identify, well, in an ideal world, what would we do? This would be the ideal maybe solution. And then we went through a whole process and said, well, okay, what can we do within the confines of your right-of-way and your existing curb lines? So we've come up with, through all the inventory analysis, a preliminary plan. If you click on it, you get to this site that Community Remarks has helped us put together. And it gives you an overview of the plan, the different lines you see there. And these little bubbles are the input that we're receiving so far. And what's kind of intriguing about this versus the static plan is you could change the background. Go look at the satellite image instead of a regular map. You could zoom in on things. If you click on a line, you could begin to see what we're talking about there. You know, the line may say buffered bike lanes. You may go, what's a buffered bike lane? Well, you click on it, you get a picture. You want to see more? You click on the link. You go to the NACTO website, and you'll see pictures and more information than you ever wanted about buffered bike lanes or any of the things that were proposed. So you have ability to find out information. And then if you look on the right, there's all kinds of things. We have cross sections, road crossing improvements, spot improvements, multimodal hubs, transit or enhancements. And if you put all these on the map, this is the next level of detail. You click on one of those and you see, well, when we say crossing improvement, well, we're talking about a crossing island with these different types of features, and it's going to be configured like this in a T-intersection. So someone gets an idea of what it's actually going to look like. You could click on it, get enlargement, and again, click on other bits of information. We also have the ability to zoom out and do an entire, you fill up your whole monitor with the maps. And if you click on the cross sections, we have very detailed cross sections up here. If you click on it, you could get an enlargement of down to how many feet for this lane, for the buffer, the bike lane, very detailed, specific recommendations. Now, if you think it's silly, we have a link for you to go to StreetMix, which is an online resource, and design the roadway yourself. start out where we are. You could add different elements. Say if you want a streetcar going down Hilton, well, you could add it into there. But you have the ability to play with things and get a feel for what actually fits in the right-of-way. And then send it to us. You could add your comment to the map. You do a place mark. You fill out the information on your comment. You can put your name, your email if you want. That stuff's all confidential. You get your comment. You could upload a picture. You could upload that cross-section you just did. And you could put that up to the website. And that information is now up for everyone to look at, especially us. We kind of read these things. We get a post every time someone does something. But then you could then look at what other people said. You could respond to them. You could give them a thumbs up or thumbs down. So this way we have a way to kind of get a feel of, is this comment in line with the general public? Is this an outline comment? Where do people see things? It's kind of a handy tool for us. You could also look at all the comments thematically. We kind of group them into love it, need some work, hate it, or you're missing something. And you could kind of look at all the different comments. So if you have a kind of a whole overview of a network, we have a very fine-grained system on a variety of different road types, something that you can navigate if you're a 12-year-old kid, to something maybe if you're more advanced cyclist going down a busier road. We have details. Every one of those dark green boxes is a cross-section that's very specific. So there's a lot of very specific information and recommendations. Even when we do the local road bike routes, these bicycle boulevards, we give recommendations of how to maybe alternate and shift parking, do different things like little mini buttons in the intersections and the stops to kind of calm traffic and make it much easier for bicycles, pedestrians, and cars to mix. A key aspect of this is getting across the road. We have looked at lots of different ways to get you across all these different roads safely, different techniques for different roadways. Each one of those buttons will bring you to a detailed recommendation. Spot improvements, the little things that don't fall into any particular category. Some of these will click to little diagrams of whole plans of, especially like down by 8 Mile and Hilton, that crazy intersection down there. How do we do that and get people from one place to another and across 8 Mile? We have diagrams of all those types of things. Multimodal hubs. A lot of times we think of multimodal hubs as the big bus station. Well, there's the potential for a lot of little things where maybe you have a grouping of zip cars, bike sharing areas next to a bus stop that ties in with some of your little commercial areas, little mini versions where you're encouraging people to explore different alternatives and tie that into wayfinding and even little mini repair stations for your bicycle and where you have some tools and racks. Actually fairly cost effective, but you begin to spread this around and it really makes a difference. And enhancements to transit, a lot of it really is coordinating crossing and transit improvements. So if you get off the bus on one side of the street, you could actually get to the other side safely. All those green things are links to detailed recommendations. There's a ton of information up here. I'm afraid of, and that's the challenge of this plan. There's almost too much information taken at once. It works much better if you're going to look at your particular street or the area of your interest to kind of delve into things. But a lot of information there. So it's not just the physical recommendations. We're right now working with Hank and steering committee and Derek on policies and programs, looking at what you have up there, looking at different recommendations for policies and programs, different educational campaigns. And then we're also right now kind of beginning to sketch out the implementation plan. How do we integrate this into your capital improvement plans, phasing it, begin to look at costs so you can begin to start applying for funding for these different aspects. So what's next? We're scheduled to have this done by March. I don't see any issues. We're, I think, in some ways ahead of the schedule in some areas. We're going to be working on finalizing these draft elements of the plans as more public input gets in. That master plan, that's that big every dot and everything in page, we're going to be pulling that apart and making it a little bit easier to wade through on the website. and you'll see us again as we begin to take this through the final plan approval process, public hearings going through this group and city council and all that. So that's kind of a quick overview of where we are. I would encourage you to go see Hank's handiwork and go up to ferndalemoves.com, explore it. There are other pages that haven't been published yet that are kind of, as we're building up there, and as they get vetted by the steering committee, will be rolled onto there. So, questions for the three of us here?
Well, I think it's a very impressive website, so kudos to you and to everyone who is involved.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent some time playing around. I forwarded it to all my friends, do the survey. So hopefully you've gotten some good input, and it seems like you've gotten quite a bit of comments. Just one question I'm having, just because I'm not seeing the correlation, and maybe I'm just, so the interactive map, which I think is a great thing, is that directly related to the previous, the past input section of the hopes and concerns?
Correct. So the survey that we sent out, it was basically giving the direction of things like, for this type of road, is this the right type of solution? Right. And we took that information, and that then guided the implementation. So if people said, okay, I think this is the right type of crossing or right type of bike facility, that then got applied to those roadways. So that the survey guided things, the hopes and concerns, and the input here, and we're drilling down to more and more detail as we go along.
Luckily, or unintentionally, we skewed the survey questions. The answers corresponded with what is the appropriate fix, too, from a expert standpoint and across the board, what we all agreed with. The answers to the survey almost directly correlated with what we all felt was the ideal design or cross section for the road section in question. So,
you're being recorded, right?
Yeah, I know. Whether or not that was by luck or by crook, we're not quite sure yet. But I mean, Norm can agree or disagree. But we got the survey back, and we thought either the people who took the survey are, and we intentionally sent it to people who are not the choir. We did not send it to the bike groups. We did not send it to the advocacy groups.
Really? Because I knew the names of every commenter on every page.
We tried to get answers.
And Kevin Deegan Cross is in that picture.
Yeah, we tried to get answers from people or ideas from people who weren't the normal choir, and even they either intuitively or not answered in a way that corresponded with what we felt was the best solutions as well. I don't know if that's a fair way to put it, or
it is, in the sense of there are not super cut guidelines of over this volume in this lanes you do this. There's no look-up table in the guidelines out there, but there are some generally accepted approaches of once you get to certain levels you need to do other things. And we kind of went with what the current best practices were for the different roadways. But again, that was our opinion as a consultant, the steering committee vetting it, and we said, well, that's the experts, but it's not our community. We wanted to make sure that we were in line with the community, and we said, well, do you think this is overkill? And some people thought it was overkill. Do you think this is about right? Most people said this is about right, and some people said, oh, you need to do a little bit more. And when we would kind of begin to see as we're in that middle road, okay, we're about right. Sometimes we had the luxury, because you have a lot of excess capacity in your roadway systems here, a lot of extra lane width, to do perhaps more, just because you maybe didn't need that buffered bike lane according to the thing, but why not? You actually have room, and it's a way to maybe up the level of service or quality of service for bicycles in a couple of cases. So if anything, we might have strayed a little bit more just because it didn't do anything to automobile level service. And I have to say, when we think in safety, we're not just thinking peds, bike or transit users. We're looking at things from the whole perspective. Can we replace a signalized intersection with a roundabout and dramatically reduce crashes? Can we keep the traffic speed to what the community wants along that roadway, which also improves safety for everyone? A lot of different aspects. So it wasn't just bikes and peds.
and as we go forward, I mean, you saw the March timeframe. I would encourage everybody to look at it. I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but in almost every instance, we directed the consultants to err on, I like the word equitable. It's the one I've been using all along. That regardless of what the count shows, I mean, all of these projects are infinitely justifiable, doable, and fit within the existing right-of-ways. One of the charges we gave was this is not to be a study in renderings or pretty pictures of how roadways can be built in the best case scenarios, but they have to fit within our existing right-of-ways. These have to be things that I can and we can hand to engineers and turn into permit drawings. But that being said, they are aggressive in their desire to incorporate improvements for all modes of transportation, whether it be pedestrians, bicycles, looking for design exemptions from AASHTO guidelines. All of them are infinitely achievable, but outside of what would probably be the standard roadway design. Everything from our secondary bicycle boulevards to mini roundabouts to cycle tracks. We'll always talk about funding, but the direction in the plan was not to edit ourselves based on what we think funding may or may not be in the future, but to put together cross-sections that we feel best represent what the city of Ferndale desires. So I would encourage everybody, because we're going to ask you to adopt this, and we're going to ask that this be an appendix to the master land use plan, that everybody's comfortable with that. I don't want to hide it or have it be lost in the website either, that everybody's comfortable with these improvements.
I did want to also add one of the aspects of this project that I really love. It's really a hands-on project for the city and the school district to work together with the intent of trying to set up the school district to be a really attractive applicant for safe routes to school. So we're helping them prepare in order to do that. I think some people are still skeptical because 30% of the school children actually live in Ferndale. So, is that right?
That's not.
It was 30%, was it?
More than 30% of our schools.
30% are within
Walking distance. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I knew it was 30%. I couldn't remember what of. And so how do we increase that? More kids in that 30% range to actually start walking.
Yeah, we've made agreements with the school district. There's two school district representatives, one an administrator, one from the school board on the advisory committee. And Norm is going through, and every project or every improvement anywhere in the city that could loosely correlate to a potential safe routes to school program is being tagged as such. And basically what we're trying to do is do the legwork for the school districts, because only they can become become the Safe Routes to School program. They have to apply. But we're trying to do all the upfront legwork for them, so if they adopt the Safe Routes to School program at an individual school, they can then easily identify all the projects in our plan that would be associated with that school and that Safe Routes to School program. And I'm looking at Norm to make sure I'm not...
I'm going to correct Derek here a little bit, and he said that could be loosely associated. Actually, I would say completely obviously associated with a particular school. Because if you draw a walking buffer around your schools, the entire city is covered. And, I don't think there should be, okay, once you get past middle school, we don't care if your safety of walking around the community. This is whether you are 80 or you 18, this is going to make it easier to walk, whether it's to school or to the store or to your job. So really everything here could be construed as a safe routes to school plan, as it could just general mobility and safety.
Any other general thoughts or questions? I do have two specific thoughts. I don't know if you're looking for specific, but as I was perusing the map, I don't know why I didn't think about it earlier, but was there discussion at all about the 10-mile/service drive? Because it seems like there's no recommendations at all for that whole area. And we're talking about potential 75 changes and things over there. We have the whole, so the 696 service drive, and only have a small portion of it, but we're talking one-way traffic already, so it seems like we should have some type of bike lanes or something on the service drive.
Yep.
Not 696 service drive, no.
I mean, I think the 696,
You're talking about the 696 Service Drive on your side.
right, which is 10 mile, essentially. Yeah, but by Hardy Park and Hilton, and as it curves to the, there's a couple, yeah.
Did look at that a little bit. Again, you're right, we do not have a specific recommendation in there, and we even looked at some of the alleyways and all that. One of our conclusions were that we might be better doing some of the east-west stuff on the neighborhood connectors south of there rather than the amount of money that would take to kind of rework some of the service drive and just the speed, the volumes, and just if you go out, stand there, the sound aspect as far as a pleasant place to walk or bike. We thought for the cost benefit, would we be better off doing something east-west within the neighborhoods rather than spending which would be fairly substantial dollars to retrofit that, and also dealing with contraflow bike facilities to the one-way service drive. But it's something we could go look at again.
My only thought would be just that if, like I said, it seems like service drives tend to get some attention from other funding sources maybe, or that I would hate to lose opportunity if we're resurfacing or doing some changes to the service drives that we miss opportunity to stripe a bike lane or something because we didn't mention it in our plan.
We'll go take another look at it.
And then my second one, and I don't, maybe it's probably too close to another road, but if you look at the network, on Gainsborough, it kind of parallels the railroad track, and if you go to Camborne South, there's recommendations all the way down to Marshall, and then Woodward Heights North, there's Bermuda, but there's kind of a gap. That seems to me like a logical, good place, and I actually bike that road pretty often, and I think it's a good route, and it's kind of not on this map at all.
Which side of Gainsborough?
But you're talking like between
Camborne
and Woodward Heights.
Woodward Heights.
Yeah, just kind of continuing with that.
Yeah, because it seems like it's a gap, that if you're going north and south, I mean, I know there's,
but no, you're right, because
Bermuda just to the east or west a little bit. But yeah, I think Gainsborough's a nice low.
Yeah, you said the key words. You ride it.
I ride it.
Yeah,
so
then we'll go back and look.
Yes,
at
I would just think that's kind of a gap that you want to look
it
at.
seems. Yeah, I look at what you're saying, and I could see that. So we'll go take a look at that one. That's exactly the type of input that we're looking for because you ride it.
Yeah, and we've been trying to stick with the theory of the dirt path through the grass lot.
Right.
I mean, it's not where do we think we go, but where do people intuitively want to ride or walk, and then making improvements that are corresponding with that. So.
Okay. All right. So that's my specific comments. But all right. Any other comments? I think this is a great.
I just wanted to say that, sorry to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
On the part of the website, I mean, we're still feeling out exactly how the content should be laid out, and, the content is pretty much all norm, and we've been working closely on that. I know Melanie early on gave us some excellent recommendations, but I did set up comments at ferndalemoves.com. That's open to anybody. If there's something that you'd like to see on the website, whether it's something that I have the skills or Derek has the budget to do or not, it would be nice to know what your feedback is. Is this in a logical place? Does this have a typo? Is this worded in a way that's really sounds, like planner speak? It doesn't have to be a complete thought. It doesn't have to be a well-developed email. Just shoot us your comments because the more the better. So,
one thing I'm going to correct Hank here. She said the content's all norm, and that's really not correct. I'm remiss by not mentioning Carolyn Prudhomme. The Greenway Collaborative is a giant two-person operation, and Carolyn has been instrumental and key and done the lion's share of the work here. She's been at every steering committee meeting. She'll be here tomorrow morning. I gave her the night off. So she is key. Her handprints are all over this plan. So she's done an excellent job for us.
And I can't emphasize enough. I mean, we want you guys to be comfortable with it. Ultimately, the Planning Commission adopts these plans, and we do intend this to be an addendum to the Master Land Use Plan, and that is, if not one of the most important documents that the City of Ferndale does. And you'll hear some more about that in a minute. We're going to get started with that soon. We felt these were important pieces to put in place before we redid it. And we're going to ask you to adopt a website. I mean, we're not sure. We're talking to the city attorney about how that holds up legally, and so far we're not running into any obstacles. but we want to make sure you guys are comfortable with the content and that feel it's the appropriate way to go forward. I'm not sure now, because of how excited we got about it and how much time we've spent with it, that we could do it any other way. We may be able to print the pages and staple them together at some point, but and obviously there's still time for questions, but I can't tell you the amount of effort that both Hank and Norm, because of the excitement with the project, how much more I feel we've gotten as a community out of this than we normally would have gotten from a static plan. It's been really enjoyable to do. It's so simple, we're all used to websites and now, but every now and then I take a step back, and most of you up there know, having planning backgrounds, sending it to planning friends and stuff. And a lot of them think it's rather cool that someone has finally taken a plan and turned it into a website. And the more we look at it, the happier and happier we become with it. So that being said, we do want to know if you have concerns with it. We do want your input. It is going to be the Planning Commission and plan, and it is going to be a part of the Master Land Use Plan. So please take some time and read it and let us know if you have any concerns or if any part of it bothers you going forward. We think it's more than just a novel idea. You'll hear in a little bit, we intend and hope to evolve this idea to be something we do for more than just transportation planning. So I know I jumped in before we're done, but we're still here for questions on this.
So you're doing this with the CIP next year? Is that it?
Well, we've uploaded all of our CIP projects into an online software. Whether or not that's going to work out this year or not, we're still trying to figure out. But yeah, we are trying to move to a more living set of documents, for it to sound a little corny, but that is exactly what we're trying to do.
And just thinking about how we use this as to not just be a website on the shelf once you adopt it. But like when we see site plans, I know obviously most of this is public realm type things, but as we see plans coming in, how maybe even staff can incorporate a section of how it relates to the recommendations of the Ferndale Moves plan, and if it's calling for a mid-block crossing in this area, if they're accommodating the extra, bump out or whatever while they're.
Well, our intent is the projects that are in here. The next one, for an example, the next project that's funded is East 9 Mile, from Woodward to West End, and that's coming next year, whether it's before the Dream Cruise or after. Shortly after we hope this plan is adopted, the minute the cross sections are done, they'll be posted on this website for public comment. So people will see actually what the improvements are. As it's funded and as it's constructed, this will be the place you can go to find out your construction schedules. As other projects come online and move from the planning phase to the funding, hopefully that's exactly our intent, is to not have this be the equivalent of a plan on the shelf. It's easy to say, and we're not sure we'll be successful. We hope we will be, but that's absolutely our intent.
I think one thing Derek said that I like to perhaps highlight. This is, after all, even with all the detailed cross-sections, it's a master plan. It's looking at a system, it's looking at policies and programs. And when something like 9 Mile is going to be done, it gets another look, it gets refined. We didn't get everything figured out for every particular road and every nuance. I think we did a pretty good job, but there's a whole nother look at it, and there's a whole nother realm or level of public input. So the cross sections up there are not the, set in stone, the end all. It is a guideline, master plan, general direction that will come back to you when it gets to that next level.
Just a question. I guess I'm not playing devil's advocate. We're going old school here, but if there is somebody who says, "How do I print this?" and obviously it's a website. I get that, and there's all these, bump up things that pull up. Is there a way to create something that is printable? And I guess I would summarize, that would say, like, on 9 Mile, here are the recommendations, a summary of, like, here are the cross streets, here are the cross sections, here, a way to break it down for, let's say, somebody who just totally doesn't have a computer, or to summarize it, or I don't know.
I'll let Norm correct me if I'm wrong, but community remarks is, unfortunately, it's not embedded in the website right now, and that's going back to the skills and budget thing. But ideally, it'd be nice to have it within the website. Right now, if you go to it, you don't have that option. But if someone, for example, this board, if an individual resident, community remarks should have all of those things that are input. They're being displayed in a visual way, but on the back end, it's just basically a spreadsheet. So it would just be in a database. And that should be able to be printed out. And I believe that it should be in Excel format.
Well, yeah.
And now it could easily be upon
Yeah,
request.
the comments we've gotten will actually, I should explain something. The community remarks is simply a tool, as Hank said, and that's just for the input. The maps will go out of that community remarks into the website itself, and you'll be able to print out the overview. You know, you go look at the page, you can print it out where the page that has all the little dots that says crosswalk improvement. You'll be able to print that out. The same with the one that has cross sections, but you won't be able to, it's not going to be, because this would probably be like a 400-page report if we were to actually put it from one end to another. You will have in your possession every single cross-section graphic that can be put together, you know, when it comes to the next level. What is lost is the direct link of, I see the colored line that says this, I click on it, gives me more information, I click on that. That we can't replicate into a report without a great effort. So it was kind of a path we went down, you know, even the way of building it all in Google Earth or Google Maps.
But I guess I'm wondering if there's a way to create, maybe this is your staff, sorry, or what, just like I don't say a cheat sheet, but like you're saying, on here there's a bubble if you want to know what, you know, separated buffer bike lane means, but like maybe there's a handout that kind of shows the graphic of what that is and what roads in Ferndale that applies to versus what this might look like. Do you know what I'm saying? Kind of a cheat sheet of things.
I do know what you're saying. There's never going to be a way to easily to replicate the entire plan in a printable format. If there is a need or a desire to create a executive summary, shortened version of it that goes through the implementation and basic projects, we'll have to create it. We haven't done so yet, and so far we haven't been asked for it. But yeah, if there's a need for it, if the community asks for it, if residents ask for it, and we can't print out the sections that are pertinent to answer their questions and make them feel comfortable, then we're going to have to create something that's a truncated version of this that can be handed out, and it'll have the caveat on it that this is not the complete plan, but we can do it. We haven't done it yet. We're hoping not to have to, but we'll see where this goes over time.
But some of it might actually be done in that when we have the map online, they'll say crossing improvements. These are going to be color code to say crossing island with a flashing beacon, or all the different, you know, be like half a dozen different color codes in their placement on the maps. There's also going to be a page that says, when we say crossing island, this is what it looks like, these are the key elements of it. So you could print out that page that has the crossing island map and the key, and then you could print out the other pages of what those things are, and you do that with all the different sections, and it is not as perfectly lined up and formatted as a regular report, but it would suffice. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess I have a sister question. Normally when we adopt something, it's, you know, you've got this bound book.
And you put it at the library and people review it and there's public hearing. And
if there's something that's adjusted on it, it comes back and it gets updated and modified. So is there a provision for, like, if you do have documents you're going to update and add, how do you differentiate between what's just informational purposes, or how, you know, does it come back in front of us again, or what is the content that we're adopting versus the content that would be constantly changing and updated?
That's something we've given a little thought to, and because we have the same concern. So there will be the elements of the plan of do this here or do this type of policy that are static. And then there are the elements of, okay, we're working on restriping Livernois or Pinecrest or whatever, and this is the plan, let's get input on that, or your request for bike parking that's dynamic. There will be a differentiation of, you know, I don't know how we'll do it just yet, that this is an approved part of the master plan, some type of little indication on the page of what's static versus what's dynamic. And then also there's some things where we're linking to guidelines that are outside, though obviously you won't be part of the master plan.
So because the static pieces could potentially be in an executive summary and overview, and that's technically what we're approving versus all of that, the dynamic pieces of it.
Correct. Yeah, how we're going to do it yet? No, there's no question. We jumped in with both feet. I mean, we're making. I don't want to say we're making it up as we're going along, but we had a rough outline of what we wanted to do, and it's evolved considerably since we started. These are all questions under consideration, and like anything new or anything you try to do for the first time, I would be remiss, or we would all be, to say we know exactly how that's all going to work at the end. We're very confident. We've come far enough now that we're confident that we'll make it work, and that there's going to be something that's both adoptable and static. If we need to create a printable version of that that's acceptable for public consumption, we will. Again, I'm hoping we don't have to. And then separate that from what's the ongoing input, conversational part of this this idea that's supposed to be the place where everybody can see the dialogue, shoot a picture of the broken curb outside of the front of their house and post it and say, when are you going to fix this? And have it be that type of interaction. Yeah.
I forgot what I was. I think
Talk long enough.
No, I think we're all on board with the concept. I think it's great. I don't think anyone's criticized. I think it's fabulous. I'm just trying to picture the communication element of it to people who don't get all this. Do you know what I'm saying? And we all get this, I'm assuming. And like most people, and Ferndale's are young, and it's hip, and it's funky, and it's fabulous. And, right, but my mom wouldn't get this. You know what I mean? And so
Craig Covey would raise his hand and remind you that he's colorblind.
So I don't mean to.
But that translates to a colored photograph, a colored print too. I mean,
Yeah.
The same comment applies to that as well.
But I just mean that
on a website.
there's got to be a simplistic way to just summarize the main points. Again, and even if we're just narrowing, and even if we're oversimplifying it, but just, like I said, the main different types, the two-way cycle track, buffered bike lanes, conventional bike lanes, shared, the main map, and then maybe there's, just like one type of symbol for for road crossings, or just, a summary, executive summary, and I don't want to create more work.
We understand. We don't think there's a criticism whether we have the same concern and I'm working towards the same end.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Yes.
I think I know we're going to be talking about the master plan update, and I think there are some examples elsewhere in the cities that we could look at to help tie these elements together. At the end of the day, I asked the same, or not at the end of the day, but at the beginning of this project, I asked the same thing: how are people going to access this who don't have a computer? And then I'm like, well, I have no idea how many people are accessing the printed plans shoved away on a shelf in the library,
right?
There's no way to determine the frequency of use of those.
Sure there is. Ask the library.
Well,
it's checked out.
I don't even know if it's checked out, but that would be something interesting to know.
Everyone's ever checked out the master plan?
I don't think anyone's ever checked out the master plan. And now that it's online.
Yeah, I've been here 3 years. No one's ever asked me for a copy of the master plan.
It's online.
Now,
I know, yeah.
But it's a simple PDF. But it's a simple PDF. It's not like, whoa, like this bubble pops up and then it takes you to different bubbles. You know what I mean? It's a complex website.
I think what we could do is probably have a summary, something called general policies that are guiding this.
Maybe that's just in the master plan,
Yeah. Maybe the overview or executive summary lives in the master plan.
We'll continue to work on it. We certainly hear the concern, and hopefully we'll have a something to show you by the time we bring it back for adoption.
If you see something that you like that's been done in another place, send us the link. I mean, that's the best way to figure out how to do those things is to see who's already done it. So if somebody's already done something that you like, we've been looking for exactly that type of thing. We have some go-to websites that, people who have been using different tools or websites to communicate these types of city plans, but a lot of people, don't do it.
It's really cool that we are. This feels like something that big cities with big budgets do.
It definitely is.
I bet Boulder does it,
I so commend you guys for thinking
But if you
big.
see something that's
like thinking big is awesome.
But, navigating new territory.
Yeah, it's great.
Really cool.
But definitely.
For sure.
Sarah, if you
Portland
see a good
does this, not
brochure, if
Portland,
you see
right?
something that...
I'm sure you have already done way
I hear it.
more research on it than I have.
I still got one question about Hilton. I now remember taking the survey. At first, I was like, I know Melanie told me to take the survey. I don't remember I took the survey, but when you described the, is it too much, is it not enough, is it whatever part, now I remember the survey. What I don't remember is, did I need to tell you who I was and where I lived?
No.
Yes.
You did?
Did.
I don't think you did.
Yeah, so we had at the end of the survey, we divided up the city into quadrants, the surrounding communities, and we asked, do you live here? Do you work here? And then also some basic information about how far do you live from your job, and all those different types of
Right.
elements, yes.
Can you tell from that information, or maybe from some of the comments that you've gotten, whether or not you've had any type of significant participation from the folks along Hilton, particularly north of 9 Mile? Because, you know, if you look at us as a city that already has a lot of amenities, bike lanes on Hilton, I had to hear for 4 years, were not an amenity in the minds of older people who lived along Hilton. So changing that, they were some of the first ones we did too. You know, there's lots of things that could be changed over there, but I wondered if you have any sense of whether or not people in that neighborhood weighed in on interventions along Hilton and what was appropriate for Hilton.
We did have pretty good feedback from across the community.
Okay.
I could not, off the top of my head, tell you what that quadrant
That's
said,
all right.
but I
You've got some
can,
people from that quadrant.
but it's very easy for us to go do a filter
Okay.
and say, based on this, so I'll go back, and we're pretty booked up tomorrow, but next week, we'll go take a peek, and we'll send you and let you know what they said.
I would be so interested to know if they looked at, now knowing that we sort of had a recommended intervention that was sort of appropriate to the road that we were recommending it for, if they looked at something and said, oh, that would work on my street.
If they didn't like the bike lanes, they're not going to like what we're recommending, probably. Anybody who didn't like standard bike lanes probably isn't going to like the well, maybe they will. I
Maybe they
shouldn't
will.
make that kind of generic comment.
Maybe what we've often heard is that there isn't enough differentiation between the parking area and the bike lane area, and that semi-trucks in particular use it as sort of a giant wide turnaround area or parking area.
One of the key aspects with Hilton is, you know, you go down that road right now, it's just wide open.
Want the getaway lane?
Yeah, I mean, with the parking, the bike lanes, the lanes of traffic,
Ridden people speed out of town to April.
Yeah.
the buildings are relatively low, you know, there's not much there.
Yeah.
And so one of the key things was through curb extensions, islands and medians, to try to bring the scale of that a little bit more human to what's going on there, and especially support some of the business districts that are scattered up and down there, making them feel like you have a little district, if you will.
Yeah.
That there's something there rather than just happen to be dropped along a big, wide open road.
Interesting, and it will be interesting to see how some of those things work with the neighboring industrial districts that are still served by semis, that if you put a little divided median in, they're going to drive over it.
Well, we have been looking at those things.
Like I said, and our goal is that, you know, these aren't pie in the sky projects. I mean, it'd be really neat to do renderings and pretty pictures, but so far everything we've designed is designed to fit within, hopefully within the right of way, or it should fit within the right of way, and should meet the prevailing design guidelines of both MDOT or the appropriate or applicable road agencies, whether it's NACTO, whether it's AASHTO. All of them have some basis in accepted and adopted design standards. So they fit and they work with trucks, they work with fire trucks, they work with pedestrians. It's not a vision. These are actually, hopefully, if we've done our job well, are implementable projects. And prioritized, by the end of it, they'll be prioritized as well as to which ones should go first and how to complete a full network, not just how to do each segment when we happen to get funding for it, but how to prioritize and do the whole network throughout the city.
And I think it's important to stress something that MDOT maybe said no to last month, they might say yes to next month. I was just on a conference call sitting on this group that's working on a curriculum where MDOT is trying to say, well, okay, complete streets, what does that mean? How do we take the truck traffic, the automobile, the bike, the ped, how do we make this work actually, what things do we need to change? How do we get the, where people are saying no to yes if there's no real good reason to say no? So this is something the MDOT as an institution is trying to be a better partner with the communities and make sure that they're working with current best practices, as is all their folks. So again, things are changing rapidly, and I wouldn't base, worries and concerns on what happened last year on what may happen. Things are changing dramatically. I say it used to be you had roads, and engineers said, based on this model, you need this, and this is your road. Deal with it. And I think now everything's on its head. It's like, this is your road. What do you want your road to look like, and how do you want your road to work? And that's the direction we're going.
So again, take a look at it. Let us know if you see anything. We will be back. The advisory committee will meet. We're working with the school district on a walk, and then the focus will be on implementation, prioritization, and the programs and policy section. So if you see anything, let us know. If you have any concerns, let us know, and we hopefully will be back.
I'll be back in 13 hours. So.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
All right, which brings us to our third presentation, which is our master land use plan.
It is, and this is a topic that you guys have been talking to me about for the last couple of meetings, and something we've been talking about internally and truthfully dragging our feet because we wanted to see how this multimodal plan process went, and specifically, truthfully, how the website component of it worked out. Martha Porter has been working with us just for a few weeks. She's spent quite a bit of time in the city, though. She's worked with the BDA in the past and continues to. She's working with us now, too, as a part-time planning assistant. And she's been tasked and has been working with how should we look at our master land use plan update. We've talked about the incorporation of the multimodal plan, the transit-oriented development plan, and some updates, and been pouring through our master plan, where we're at, some of the things I've heard from the Planning Commission and others in the community about different issues related to planning and the plan in the city. And she's going to walk you through or facilitate a process quickly here as to where she sees we're going, and then also what you guys want to see from the master land use plan process coming up. So.
Right, and hi everyone, I'm Martha, and it's nice to be here, and I know it's late, so I'm going to try and make this quick. But this, I would like to be as much of a collaborative discussion as possible, because with the information that I'm able to present and take away tonight from you, then I will be writing the RFP. So, as you know, the, yeah. So the latest master plan was from 2008. There are just a couple of facts about it. I'm sure that you're all familiar with it, though, so for brevity's sake, I'm also just putting up here the questions that I put into the packet for you tonight. Hopefully you had a minute just to consider them. Basically, they just ask for a little bit of reflection on your part. Have we really held the 2008 plan up? Have we implemented what we said we would? Have we strayed from it in any way? And if we have, then why? Is it still relevant, basically? And so this is the part, I'm going to just take the 2008 plan, chapter by chapter, and go through it with word by word, and just kind of refresh your memories on what's included, and then issue some recommendations. They're just my recommendations based on what I've read and based on my time here in Ferndale, both with the DDA and now with the city. So don't take them to be written in stone. So the introduction, we had a couple of things: historical context, geographical location, very typical introductory thoughts and figures. I would suggest that we include a few more recent plans, such as the environmental inventory that was done in 2011. The Woodward 5 sustainability indicators could potentially be helpful. The TOD plan, obviously Ferndale moves, and I know that we were wondering what it would look like in a more typical written or printable format. Maybe this is where we could adopt it. Maybe this is where it would be laid out. And also, I thought that maybe since the country itself is coming out of a pretty historic recession, some employment history for context might be worthwhile. Does anyone have any input so far? I'm going to ask you this after every slide, so please don't punch me in the head.
If you're going to do employment history, would you do maybe a point in time of 2008 and 2014 so we could see the...
Sure.
Maybe?
Yeah.
And I guess my comment also is going to depend on the context of how else the plan develops. Like,
Okay.
Is there going to be an economic development chapter? I thought it might be more
There-
appropriate in that chapter.
Yeah, okay.
So I guess it depends on what else is coming.
Yep. Okay. So moving on, the vision, goals, and actions chapter really set the tone for the entire document. We had these three tenets of preserve, enhance, diversify. Preserve included things like traditional downtown environment and cultural diversity. Enhance, they wanted to enhance the safety of streets, barrier-free accessibility, awareness, and improvements. These are just some examples. They're not exhaustive. Diversify the tax base, types of businesses and services. So my suggestions include just trying to review what's the same and what has changed, and then prioritizing, which can also be true for the whole document. So is there anything specifically here that you see a need for?
I really would like the staff to consider some elements out of the SHAPE IPSI plan.
Yeah.
They really took a very different approach from your traditional master plan, and they have some guiding values in there that I really think are important. I mean, they're almost, you could cut them and paste them from IPSI to Ferndale.
Okay.
They're almost exactly the same thing. And I think those are relevant in helping shaping our next version of our master plan. I mean, some of their guiding values, just as a example, is diversity is our strength, Ypsilanti is sustainable, anyone, no matter what age or income, can find a place to call home in Ypsi, anyone can easily walk, bike, drive, or take transit from anywhere in Ypsi. And so these are their guiding value statements of coming up with their actions for going forward. And I really like that approach.
And Mel, I think that they also came from some of their initial public visioning sessions. Yeah. So definitely, I think that would be.
Yeah, they did a whole design charrette, which I'm not sure we need, but they're moving to form-based codes, which I like. I think the Planning Commission needs to have a discussion on how do we move forward on that, because it was in the last master plan in the last 5 years and have made progress in other areas. And so,
Well, and no one was developing anything for the last 4 of those 5 years.
yeah.
So.
So I think we need to have that conversation. So I don't know if values fit in your chapter 2, but it may be a good spot here.
Got it. So the next chapter in the 2008 plan dealt with land use. It gave an existing inventory, a description of type, and then future plans by use, and then it had 4 sub-area foci. So my suggestions include considering regional analyses like those that Jason spoke about tonight, encouraging or maybe requiring density and height, looking at maybe the zoning that we could implement to do both or neither, identify 2 to 3 redevelopment-ready parcels, and then giving visual descriptions. And this is kind of what I'm talking about, showing the zoning. IPSI is moving to form-based code. I think we could even do some transect zoning, which maybe you're familiar with it. It moves you from the rural into the urban environment, and that's the picture on the left. The SMART code shows you what each section would look like. So if you're going to put a tree, what would it, if you're going to do, trees, what would it look like in a more rural environment versus an urban environment? it just gives people a very clear idea of what is or is not to be done. And I think that that's a lot more efficient than lengthy zoning rhetoric. Any recommendations? I can also go back to the last slide.
Well, in terms of identifying 2 to 3 redevelopment-ready parcels, I mean, you're talking like Hayes Lemur's property?
Yeah.
I mean, because as I said, we need to, I think, go back at our sub-areas, because that was one of those sub-areas. And obviously, there's changes to Livernois that have happened. Not sure much has happened, I guess Hilton and Marshall, but I guess I'd want to revisit those.
And Ferndale is currently a candidate to be a redevelopment-ready community as designated by the MEDC. And so they have encouraged us to...
Are we already with those?
Yes.
Oh.
But
I
it
remember
was
those a
only
long
last
time
year
ago.
for 3 years. Technically, you need to recertify, and you're recertifying under the MEDC
Shut the
version
fuck
of
up.
ours.
Yes, it's true.
Pioneer in that, like,
I say if you wrote it, can't you just like make them do it?
That's what we tried to say.
I don't work at the Suburbs Lines anymore. They sold it.
Yes,
Yeah, and they sold it to
Suburbs
MEDC.
Lines,
It's not at the
MEDC went
MEDC.
back to the originally
We
certified.
should be like grandfathered in or something.
Well, we didn't lose our certification, but we are,
sorry.
part of the original program was that you would be re-looked at every 3 years. We're treating it this as our reevaluation at the end of the 3 years. So we're going through the process with the MEDC. It's not cumbersome. It has not been difficult. And in fact, Martha's kind of taken the lead and worked with the MEDC on it. It's going relatively quickly. So it's nowhere near as, I don't want to say as cumbersome as the first time.
Right.
It's more of a recertification or a reevaluation than it is going through the whole thing. So.
Sarah, do you think that sort of these conversations about height minimums and density are appropriate in the master plan, or is that more a zoning ordinance?
Well, I think it has to be the master plan to guide the zoning ordinance, but that's what was going next. So we had some very, I don't want to say heated, but we had some lively discussions for a long time about that, both as the zoning ordinance and as the master plan. And so I'd be interested in having that conversation again, because times have changed, people have changed. But I think it's not necessarily as beneficial for just us to tally it about. Like, I think we need to have some involvement from the development community and property owners, because it's easy for us to say, yeah, we want to do it, but then you get the development we just had, I already forgot, whatever.
Those people who insist it's not
Jonah.
possible.
We had Jonah Brothers coming in, and we couldn't get them to do 2 stories to save our life, so.
Yeah, and the conversation, and certainly Councilwoman Piana and I have had it at great length, and is when you start talking about requiring height, are you also including creating nonconformance?
Right.
Because it's easy to require height on new build. 95% of what we do is
Right.
redevelopment, is existing buildings that come in and want to change use, want to add an addition, want to redo their facade, and at what point do you require that 95 to 98% of your land use to be non-conforming, so they can't do that anymore unless they go up.
Right.
And that, because if you want to see true change, then that's one of the things you have to consider. Do you do that for entire corridor lengths? Do you do it for blocks? And that's where the concept of transect zoning and smart codes come in. And do we really want to look at something that is a wholesale change from traditional Euclidean zoning and going to something that's more of a smart code-based idea, where that's easier to implement on a block-by-block basis? So.
I still just think that was a prime example. I mean, we're talking a complete greenfield site. I mean, you know what I mean? It's completely starting from scratch, and we couldn't get them to do it. And so, of course, you're going to get the random guy who just buys a building and wants to open a little shop, which we want to encourage, and he's not going to build second story, whatever. But I get that. But if we're going to say, okay, we'll deal with non-conforming, but all new buildings, here you go, you have to do this. That's a discussion. I'd be all for it, but I think a lot of planners are all for it, but we have to talk about real world. So.
And I think and I forget who said it, someone has to talk and listen to the development community, because you can require 2 stories, but if you don't have the sites that support it, what you can end up with is a bad tenant mix, because they can't set aside the parking or other things to get the quality of tenant you want. So they'll build it, but you end up with lower per dollar square foot, and you end up with lesser quality tenants because you don't have the parking or the amenities to support a true 2-story development. And you have to be careful of that. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's a realistic consideration. And you have to be sure that the sites you require it on can support it not only in size, but that the tenants and that the users you'll get in it are the type of users you want. And that's a valid consideration.
I mean, I think that it's such a delicate subject that obviously there's all kinds of opinions on it, that I think it really needs to involve the city council, because, I mean, if we make an ordinance and then there's going to be some out for it, of course, so they're going to have the ZBA be really busy, but they're not going to, they shouldn't be the body that's making this determination, it should be council. So it kind of makes it pointless for us to say one thing, and then if it just goes to council and they are granting variances or deviations or modifications, you know what I mean? So we all need to be on the same page on it.
Do you think the land use plan is the right place to explore all options?
Absolutely.
And I will say, I think there's enough momentum that the city is desirous of projects that that increase density, whether it's height or density, and it doesn't, the two aren't necessarily synonymous. That the city is desirous of those, and that the example of the one new build we had, either the situation, timing, whatever it is, didn't create that type of project. Is there anything we can do either through the master land use plan or zoning ordinance to incentivize or require, or a combination of both, to ensure that that doesn't happen in the future? So what we've heard is that's probably one of the #1 considerations as we go forward with the master land use plan, is to reevaluate that, whether it's through the entire downtown, individual blocks, individual parcels, but we certainly think that's something that everybody wants to consider.
At least I definitely would suggest, for procedurally, however this moves forward, that there be some type of meeting that involves the majority of the city council.
Right.
Just because they're going to be the policy people doing it, and so, and the development, or the business owners.
If you're not familiar, I don't know how many folks are, except I mean, normally we would drag it out and show it to everybody, but we've talked internally that Ferndale is a prime candidate for adoption of a complete smart code. You know, the kind of Duany-esque. It's been called a lot of different things. It's been called form-based. It's been called a lot of different things. I mean, it amounts to transit zoning.
Now I have to read my smart zoning book.
Yeah. Okay, and
So fun.
And we'll provide some information on it, but it's something else we'd like the planning commission to consider. But it's a giant leap. I mean, it's an enormous. It's a work. There's been very few communities that have started off on that path, and then by the end of it, either through politics or private property input,
Right.
it's always been marginalized and turned into some kind of balance between 2 or 3 different styles. We think Ferndale's, like a lot of other things, is ripe to be a community that actually adopts it in whole, potentially, or at least the master land use plan indicates that they should consider adopting it in whole. So if you're not familiar with it, it's smart code or transact zoning. Take a look at it, and if you have any questions about it, let us know, and we could do something just on that before we get started with the master land use plan process.
Has everybody been trained in smart code? Has everybody had some training on it?
I have a book. Seriously, it's on my shelf. I have a book.
But you haven't really dove into it?
No.
Yeah, I don't know that.
There's a lot on YouTube about it.
I'm familiar with form-based codes, which is what we were just previously talking about, but not smart zoning.
Orientate,
Okay.
maybe consider that.
Okay.
#1 on the list then.
But again, I would think if that,
We have movie
it should be
night,
just
all the
us.
popcorn.
It should be council and the general public.
Yeah.
Not that anyone's going to come from the general public, but still.
Yeah, I would want to have some parallel introduction of smart code training for council, rather than have the planning commission go down this whole path.
Exactly.
And then have it completely die at council because they don't understand.
Which happens often.
Yeah. You know.
Okay. We're just touching on subjects right now for you guys to consider, and this is very intro today, and then we'll move forward with other stuff depending on.
This is pre-RFP. This is
I
just to
was
inform them.
excited by the whole RFP. Like, we're hiring someone else. Like, that's awesome.
Well,
Sarah doesn't have to do it?
well,
I didn't expect that. That wasn't on the table this time around.
I will add one caveat today to that, and I won't put Mel on the spot for it. You know, it depends on what all we want to do. If everybody's happy with the existing master land use plan, and it needs minor tweaking, then we don't need an RFP. I mean, we can do it internal and not. If because of the change in the economy, because of the volume of new land use potential within Ferndale, along Woodward, and other places, the Planning Commission believes that bringing in outside experts, like we did for the multimodal plan, is appropriate. Your opinion is going to go a long way in me convincing council to provide a budget for it.
we're preparing an RFP for them to review. It doesn't mean that I have the funding yet. So, and they may not think it's important, but it's going to depend a lot on what the Planning Commission wants to do and whether they think, we believe this is an appropriate time because of the changes, just wholesale changes since the last time you've had to do this, to maybe bring in some outside experts to help guide the process. You know, we look at some people think consultants are a nasty word. You know, it's
Subject matter experts. Don't even just
and
use those
we
two words.
whatever you call them, we akin it to, you know, you have a general doctor who handles your general needs, and then if you have a very specific task, you go to a specialist and you bring someone in who's an expert in it. And are we at that point where we think that's necessary, or do we think we can handle it internally?
I want to comment on, but I want to, I guess, hear the rest of the presentation first, because then I think there's a whole other thought there.
Okay, so continuing on, for this section about population, the 2008 plan looked at trends and projections and distributions. I'm also saying that we should highlight the trends, and in doing so create a tapestry. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the Esri tapestries. I have mixed feelings about them, but I know that a lot of other studies use them as kind of a backbone for looking at, for example, housing markets, shopping patterns, things like that. And I would also look at kind of our governance structure in Ferndale informally, block clubs, different groups of people that hold influence or sway throughout the city. I think it's important to identify those in a master land use plan. Any recommendations?
Sounds good.
Thanks. Sorry. Okay, physical features. We looked in 2008 at transportation and natural features. I think that the update should talk about what the public is asking for transit-wise in terms of BRT, giving, again, another nod to the Woodward Avenue Action Association's studies. I think it would also be a good idea to inventory public art in areas of cultural and historic interest. We are already fielding a request from the 8 Mile Boulevard Association for parcels and structures of historic significance on 8 Mile. So these are things that people are interested in currently. I also, maybe a little strange, but I would recommend looking at our existing tree canopy to see what we have here in terms of green infrastructure.
I really appreciate that because I've been asking for 2 years.
Oh, really?
For tree canopies.
Yes.
Yeah, but I've been kind of doing it through the DPW.
Okay.
So you should talk to Lloyd.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Where does our tree ordinance live? Is it in the Code of Ordinances or the zoning ordinance?
I imagine code.
The code. I'm thinking about the one that we invoked with Rosie's that then sort of turned into a...
Still angers me to this day. I know.
The one that turned into our conversation about pay for parking and intensity of use and that whole...
Pay for parking? You mean payment in lieu of parking?
Exactly.
Yeah, but the tree canopy thing, that was in the code, so it was kind of out of our hands. My only thought about this chapter is that I think when we did this, we were obviously kind of just doing what we could to get by in-house as much, not that we're not doing that now, maybe, but transportation obviously has risen to such an important topic that I think it warrants its own section, not just being...
Under physical features?
Yeah, it's maybe we do like a transportation section, or however this is going to be organized, and maybe do like a natural culture, or you know what I mean? Maybe not that they don't warrant their own either, but I just think that you shouldn't lump transportation. I think it's
We've
because
got 3 new transportation plans in the last 5 years.
And I think it's the natural features was so minimal because I mean it's built out community, but maybe if we talk about cultural and natural amenities or something, I don't know.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Just as an FYI, IPSI's plan has transportation chapter, and it has priorities, transportation projects, city-initiated projects, new development, new street policy changes, and programs under their transportation section.
Okay. I'll look at that.
I like that. Makes sense to me.
Okay.
And I like the adding of culture and arts and stuff.
Okay.
And definitely acknowledging in their natural features the whole environmental committee or sustainability, obviously all that kind of.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the economics section that you were asking about. I don't know if I can call you guys by your first names. Okay, Sarah. So in 2008, income and poverty was explored as well as employment statistics. I think that in this potential update, maybe looking at ways in which the city itself can accommodate individuals at all income levels, policies, zoning that encourages more equity, whatever it might be. Because we obviously, I think a lot of the character of Ferndale is shaped by people, diversity of, lifestyle choices and also of backgrounds and socioeconomic statuses and all of that. So just kind of thinking ahead of how to keep them here as Ferndale becomes a more and more popular place to live. Also utilizing the regional and national employment trends to anticipate maybe where Ferndale could attract more business, more employers.
That that sort of equity question, I like that word's come up a lot tonight. Ties in, I think, a little bit to our next section as well, in our types of housing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And remind me, what was that? What was the intro chapter you were talking about? The historical perspective of employment.
Right. Yeah. So just the context, and that was more of just to kind of set the stage for the region, especially as a metro area. What we as a region might have gone through that is unique to Michigan.
Just set the stage.
Yes. Gotcha. Although if you'd like it in this section, I can understand that as well. Okay. And then moving on to housing, 2008 gave types, so owner-occupied versus renter-occupied, age of the structures, and value. In 2014, I think that we should consider the differences in the rates. So, what are some of the trends? Are there more people renting or owning as compared to in 2008 or even when the census was taken last, which was 2010? What does it mean to go vertical in terms of affordability? Does it make it better for people in terms of rent rates by creating more units per structure? My gut tells me yes, and so does math, but sometimes it's important to put that in a plan. And also thinking about new build and rehab options, and that gives a nod back to the population when I talked about some of those tapestries. I think that when we consider where we could build new or rehab existing structures to provide more housing, what kinds of people would buy them or rent them? What are their interests? What are their lifestyle choices? The tapestry gives a rough idea of where people are moving and why, and that might be good to have in the housing section.
Is there any reason to talk about the impact of vacancy and foreclosure in this section, or have we moved far enough past that we could just treat it with a few sentences in the introduction and be done?
I would suggest the latter, but I'd like to look at it and make sure in comparison to other communities. I know how drastically our foreclosures, at least tax foreclosures have fallen.
Yes.
Our bank foreclosures appear to be falling at the same rate. And then the acquisition and rehabilitation of them, we haven't had a single structure fall to city consideration through tax foreclosure in 2 years.
That's great.
They've all been purchased. They're all owner-occupied or rentals now. And all of them have been repurchased and rehabilitated by the private sector. So we'll look at it, but my gut tells me the latter is more likely the scenario than the first.
So that's great. Yeah.
Unless the bubble pops in the middle of this.
Moving on to public facilities, in the master land use plan, there was a lot documented, and in terms of the update, I think maybe we could have the consultant team look at shareable services, where maybe some departments could help one another out, and even in between jurisdictions, so different municipalities. I know that, for example, Parks and Rec, they're now partnering with Oak Park. And so there are some ways maybe in which we could work with our neighboring communities.
Melanie, I'm really excited about page 8-2, city government, since the structure of our council manager form of government changed a couple years ago.
Okay.
There actually is some updating that needs to be done about who reports to the city manager.
Are you a reporter to the city manager?
We can just be excited. A number of our department heads used to report directly to council.
Is it possible to revisit how we structure this section? It's
Sure.
the largest section out of the whole report, and it's the least important.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
I mean,
it
it's hard
does.
to have, but
I think the slide, the imbalance of the two sides kind of says it all. It's like, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and what does it really mean?
Well, it's more of a history overview of
It
the
is.
building, and I'm not sure that's relevant.
It
in
might
the
even go better in the introduction. This is Ferndale, this is what their government provides, and shortened, of course.
Yeah, and things like ensconcing the number of sworn officers in the master plan seats. Somehow a bad idea. Don't tell the union that. Bad idea.
Okay, so moving on to the last chapter.
They hear me.
Implementation.
forget that they're here.
The
I
2008
forget that they're here.
plan looked at action items and it put those into context with department and time frame. They were broken out into the same chapters that the land use plan was broken out into. So implementation, action items based on land use patterns, neighborhoods, downtown, economic development, more or less the same as the plan. I don't have any problem with that structure. I would recommend a series of evaluatory tools so that we know when we've implemented them. Maybe they're ongoing, maybe they're not, but some measuring sticks so that, you know, people can figure out whether they're on the right track. And I would also highlight public implementation strategies. So what can our residents do, even visitors to Ferndale, to help us implement? If we look at the tree canopy and it's very low, if you have a low percentage of tree cover, maybe we could ask our residents to plant some more trees. There are simple strategies that the public can take on and that I think will help them share ownership in the plan. And maybe we could ask them to highlight some of those.
I did have one question.
Yes.
I don't know if this is more work than you need to do, but it would be nice to know, to see a quick assessment of where you think we've made the most progress on for the last 5 years on these things.
Specifically on the implementation?
Yeah, it says
Portion.
ongoing. I mean, well, what have we
Yeah.
done for the last 5 years that shows that we've done really good ongoingness?
Okay. That's something you'd like staff to do internally, Melanie? Is that?
I think it would just help the planning commission sort of give a summary of, look how much, you guys put so much effort in this in 2007 and 2008. Look what the city staff has done in the last 5 years to implement a lot of and make progress on these policies. And I think that's important to show the planning commission, you know, your policies were, your guidance was effective, and here's where we made the most progress. And how can that shape the conversation going forward as we look at some values and core areas that we want to send the city in the next 5 years on the master plan, in addition to adopting smart codes, right? Yes.
Some additional components and facets to the plan in addition to the chapters that have been mirrored here from the 2008 plan. I would recommend an accessible length. I think that it's great to have an online document, but I also currently live in a neighborhood where pretty much no one has a computer, so I am also good with the standby printable version. So I'm thinking, 60 to 70 pages is ideal, if possible. Kalamazoo did it, so maybe we can too. Public participation plan. This would be a really important element. It's also something that's recommended by the MEDC for our redevelopment ready community recertification, and should address engaging and informing the public before and after all planning processes. So as a city, the public participation plan should show what Ferndale does to get the public involved in its planning processes. We're also looking at a Parks and Recreation Master Plan update. They are ready for their update, but they've also done a number of things in the interim years to keep things very relevant, so we don't think that they need to do a complete overhaul, just an update to their plan. We'd like to make that part of the city's master land use plan update. And we were talking about the cultural assets, so cataloging them and even giving some suggestions on enhancement. So Sarah, like you said, maybe we could pair that with the natural features section. Any thoughts?
I have thoughts, but I don't know how popular they're going to be. Or I guess I don't know if I'm putting the cart before the horse, which I probably shouldn't do as a planner. But so just thinking about the overall big, so that was kind of very specific, because we went through the type, the chapters and what could we maybe do. Going back to Derek's question, I guess, which I guess when the whole RFP came up, I was like, oh, I didn't even realize we're going out for bid for this. And being the former consultant that I am, and now putting on my former consultant hat and thinking how consultants think, when you do the master plan, so we go out for bid and we do all these things that we all think should be good, good updates, then the result is going to be go out for bid to develop a smart code, or go out for bid to do more study, and it's always going to be do more studies. So I'm wondering if we can't do a fairly simple update of the things that we most think are important, with knowing that the recommendation is going to then be to do a smart code or something of that nature, or a serious reevaluation of how we do zoning, and make that the RFP, not the master plan. Do you know what I'm saying? But I'm not sure if that's too much, like I said, putting the cart before the horse. Like, do we really know, I guess, where we want to end up? But just something to think about, because I just think this needs work. This was done in, on a couch on midnight sometimes without, a whole lot of public involvement. I mean, we did hire the public involvement process, but it wasn't the best. And, it wasn't the most complete, thorough master plan. And
It was on a budget.
zero budget. And obviously Melanie really likes Shape Ipsy, which I'm sure is great. But
I
yeah.
told Derek, I don't want the planning commission to go through that again. I mean, it was great that you put your heart and soul and help save the city money, but you guys don't have the time in your lives to do that again.
Right. That's what I'm wondering if there's not, I don't say a Band-Aid fix, but it seems like there's some staff, maybe, resources. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I don't know. I don't want to speak.
That's actually one of my upcoming recommendations.
Gotcha. Oh.
Not to cut you off.
Oh, I didn't know there was more. Sorry.
No, yeah, sorry. Just a couple more slides.
So just a thought that, like, I don't know, maybe we focus the resources on implementation of what we want. Instead of,
One doesn't necessarily negate the other.
Right.
yeah, but,
You guys might not be in a position to have to choose one or the other.
okay.
Are you joking? I'm not. Seriously. After the election that we just went through, really? We might get to pay for two things that have to do with a plan? Really?
Well, I mean,
It's all about strategery.
well, yeah, I was going to say that. It depends on to what level and what. I mean, I don't think if you think that resources are necessary to do the master land use plan. If we want to bring experts in that are experts and specifically experts in urban design, Archive DS, or, it's like using a Dan Burden for a walkable plan. I mean, if you want to bring in people who are experts who come and tell you with all, you talk about, requiring height and creating nonconformance, we may want to talk to some other folks about whether or not that's a good idea or not. I'm not saying there's not the expertise in this room to make that decision, but I'm not also ruling out that we may not want to bring in people who specialize in that to have these. You talk about the adoption of a smart code. I'm certainly in favor of it and have been a fan of it, but is the Planning Commission and Council comfortable with just my expertise in that, or do they want to hear from other people who have done it? You're talking about wholesale changes in how we do things and recommendations. If we're going to go in that direction, I would tend to think, regardless of who we use or what we use to update the zoning ordinance, sometimes updating the ordinance is easier than updating the plan. That's legalese and a lot of pre-written requirements that you can just adopt. Sometimes it's dealing with the desires and what you want to develop up front that requires maybe some of that expertise opinion. I'm not saying that's the case here. We're certainly capable of updating the plan, updating the demographics, adding the COD plan, adding the multi-formal plan. We've spent a lot of time with experts
even before I got here with the TOD plan, the Complete Streets plan, the AA, developing specific strategies for redevelopment either along corridors or throughout the entire community, that would be significant upgrades, even if they were just added as appendices to the existing plan. You'd update the demographics, clean up the technical pieces, add those as appendices. That would be incredibly easy to do. If you do want to look at sub-area plans for some of the historically industrial areas, and how, if you develop those out, and what street connections you should make, and what utility upgrades you need to make, some of those things, I would be more inclined to recommend that maybe we bring on some experts to do something like that. So we haven't made a decision today. Part of why we're here is to hear what you guys think about that, and then come back with, maybe what we'll do is come back with options, what we think we can do internally, and then if there are these additional pieces, what we want to do. It might not be one RFP, maybe it could be multiple. It could be for just you guys brought on a consultant to do public participation last time. It could be as simple as that, but this time it could be someone who specializes in urban density to make recommendations, someone who specializes in smart code to do some training, not necessarily bringing in a standard planning consultant to oversee the entire process. So keep that in mind as we go forward. We're going to bring back options. This is just a start, but we want you guys to be thinking along those lines. Where do we need the most help? What areas do we want to look at? And do we need to bring extra people on board before finalizing the final version? So,
Derek, sorry, when is it due again?
Next year.
2 years ago.
Is it, well, yeah, that's
last
year.
Was it 2008, so 5 years is 2013.
Yeah, so it should have been,
Adopted this year.
okay.
No, we're going to
That
be
was what I
late,
thought.
and we know we're going to be late, but I believe and strongly believe that doing these other components, letting the AA happen for Woodward, letting the Complete Streets, letting the multimodal plan happen, getting all those things done ahead of time were more important than trying to meet an or what type of deadline. So
if we looked at smart code or, the form-based, can we make decisions on it quick enough to adopt it into this, or is it something that we would want to, I mean, yeah, we had some heated conversations and long discussions, and is that something, if we're trying to, what's the timeline that we're trying to work with then, if we're already late?
I'm not, truthfully, the city's master plan functions very well for the type of development it wants. The city's zoning ordinance does not require some of the things we want, but it certainly allows all the types of development that I believe everybody envisions, whether it's for the downtown or the rest of the community. The implementation of the mixed-use districts, some of the non-conformance created with the parking on residential lots. A lot of what you guys did prior to me or us getting here certainly allows or incentivizes the type of development I think everybody's interested in. So it's a roundabout way of answering your question we can impose a false timeline on ourselves if we want to. What I think is more important is to make sure that if you're going to update it and make significant changes, that we do it well, and not. I don't have any timelines in mind.
Because one of the things that was frustrating for me recently was having spent so much time on this and not being able to require more density or height on the Woodward development. That would be one of those things that, yeah, I would definitely want to address that in this, just because it was maddening to have spent so much time and then look through every document that we have and realize that we're completely stuck and unable to do anything more and we had such a great vision for it, and we couldn't do anything about it.
But I do want to say, and I've said this all along, your master plan right now would support you changing the zoning ordinance and requiring height. You don't have to make a single change to the master plan to amend your zoning ordinance right now. Now, if you want to do that, we can certainly pursue that on parallel tracks. There's no reason you can't do both. If within the CBD or within a certain distance of certain intersections, you want to require any new build to be a certain height, we can write that amendment now and bring it for your review without having to amend the master plan. The master plan makes it very clear you want to increase density in the downtown. That's all you need in the plan. You don't need to specifically go in and say change it to desire to require. The how is up to the zoning ordinance. You've already laid the groundwork in your master plan.
I guess going back to what Martha was saying, or she asked the question earlier, and I think I answered it, but now I think I'm changing my mind on my answer, is the master land use plan were to talk about the transect. And I think in general terms, yes, like very general terms. When you talk about the actual, how many stories, minimum, maximum, you know, I think that's not the match, that's the actual zoning process. And so I just think, I look at big picture of Ferndale, what we're doing here, and it's like there's all these big things going on, and Ferndale moves, complete streets, the transportation is, you know, covered. I think land use is really the next obvious big project in my mind. That we, you know, and so to me, if we know that the big thing coming is going to be really evaluating land use, then which really kind of focus on that as part of a separate RFP that's just focusing so much on evaluating the heights and the densities and the what are the transects going to be and what's this, you know, but for the master land use overall general plan, I don't think we need to do a huge start from scratch.
I mean, we did the best we could, but yeah, I would appreciate the information from, you know, looking at other cities or how, you know, other areas are developed, and just having that to inform how we make future decisions.
Yeah, the where is, I think, is less important than the what. And what I'm hearing is that there is a unified desire to reevaluate land use and density specifically. Not so much the demographics and everything that surround them that go into a land use plan. Whether we do that now or as part of the zoning, I don't think, I'm indifferent as to when. But I think I'm hearing, if we were to release an RFP, what the priorities are. And that's really what we're interested in as well.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I thought I realized you have more presentation. I thought you were
It's just a couple more slides. And this is just about the methodology, so how we're actually going to ask the consultant to gather the data that we're looking for. And I felt like there were two components. The first is public input. So I think that setting up like a community engagement task force or some other generic committee name would be very important. Obviously, it should be done online and in public. I'm thinking focus groups, interviews, charrettes, community meetings, online collaborative mapping, games, you know, both online and in person, online surveys, whatever. I think it's great. This is something that Hamtramck had, where they had insights and ideas. The public could say, you know, what's there and do they like it or not, and what could or should be there. Identifying issues and solution by location would be extremely helpful. And also targeting underrepresented populations, so seniors, minorities, children, really all shapes and sizes need to be included.
Children, that's a really cool idea.
I like the children component. I think that, you know, if you can get them, first of all, it's just building a stronger community, getting kids involved in civil, you know, civil functions at an early age. So, plus I think that they've got some really unique ideas about, you know, what should happen. So then the last thing is data collection. You know, national and regional changes need to be documented, and anticipating the impacts on the local data that they present. I'd love it if they would make a GIS land use inventory for us that we could have and fiddle with. And I would also try, and I used the wrong word here, I meant to say duplicative. So by economizing and limiting, I know, I'm sorry, the data collection, a lot of things can be done in-house, I believe, when it comes to collecting numbers and facts and figures. So I would like to push that as much as possible.
Who would you like to do the mapping?
Sorry?
Who would you like to do the mapping?
Well, you know, especially because we just did a whole inventory for the target market analysis and trade area report in the downtown for the DDA. We have pretty much all of the parcel information that we would need for the downtown, so that's ready to go. That's ready to be put into GIS. And I mean, I think that, you know, the rest of the parcels could be between Oakland County and even the staff here. It would be easy to do.
Is this one of those things like they do in Detroit where you mobilize volunteers with apps?
Yeah, they were students.
Oh, we have.
Oh, yeah, I think I was there for your report at Wayne. But
It's not fun.
yeah, that's one thing that we do have a richness of in Ferndale, are volunteers.
And I think Melanie's connections with Wayne State might mobilize some students.
Since the last one was done, we do have all of the land use, zoning, existing use and zoning data on GIS now.
Oops.
So we have most of that, whether we have it or whether it's housed on Oakland County's database, which we get all our information for. It's just a matter of updating at this point. And yeah, we have talked about, in fact, we've borrowed some GIS equipment or GPS equipment from Oakland County about using volunteers to go out and take specific data or GPS specific data within the city. So we think we're a lot farther along than we were in 2008 as far as what data we have in GIS already.
I'm the vice chair of D3 Advisory Council.
Cool.
And you might want to talk to them about how they could support you and compare that to Oakland County.
Okay.
They're doing the same thing for downtown Detroit, and it's going to be public so that everybody can see the parcel light parking data,
Right.
anything that they wanted to see in the downtown. And through the Michigan Profit Association, they just hired 150 locals and are training them to be the tablet people going into the neighborhoods to take photos of all the blighted buildings.
It's awesome.
And they're doing it in 3 months.
And it's non-proprietary done that way. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So you just need to look at apples to apples comparisons of the service provider of the county versus this other agency. So
Gotcha. Thank you. So that's really it in terms of the recommendations for the RFP. And I don't really know, Derek, maybe you could, I don't know what our next steps would or should be.
Well, I mean, from what I'm hearing here is, my recommendation is we would look at the things we can do in-house first, and come up with a list of the updates and what about the existing sections can either be pared down, taken down, or, a lot of the information that has been historically available through a master land use plan only, much like the Ferndale Move site, is available to everybody anywhere you want to get it. It's not necessarily incumbent on the master land use plan to be a historical document or reference for the entire city's development. So maybe we look at paring some of that down, the demographics and some of the other stuff, and focus on the issues, the land use issues, density issues in the downtown, sub-area plans, whether they're prioritized redevelopment projects. And then if we feel that we don't have the capacity in-house to do all those, then we would draft an RFP that's tailored around those specific issues, and potentially the public participation. And then talk to you about what we think the value for that would be, and whether that's worth pursuing with City Council. The council members here will laugh. All of this impacts how much parking we use in the downtown. So there's different avenues for funding, and find out if we have the budget set aside. Council has been generous enough with our department over the last 2 years to give us an ongoing either consulting budget or special contracting budget, which we haven't allocated or haven't assigned or obligated for next fiscal year. So there is some limited.
See what happens when I retire? You get a special project budget.
You voted for it. So there's ways to do these things. So our goal is to hear from you guys what you feel the most important things we need to reevaluate as part of the master land use plan is. It's easy for us to sit and figure it out or say what we think, but we want to know what you guys think. Where the master land use plan is great, doesn't need to be touched. Where you think it needs to be updated, specific areas we want to look at, where it's held the test of the time, and it sounds like some of it maybe the zoning ordinance aren't strong enough to reflect the intent or desire of the Planning Commission when it was approved previously. Some of that we can look at now, too. So our next steps would be to take the information you give us tonight and come back with some recommendations on how to proceed within the next couple of months, would be my suggestion. Long-winded.
Thanks for listening.
I do, and obviously, again, we're still here for questions. We have kicked around the idea of doing the master land use plan through the same process we did Ferndale Moves, which is moving it to and migrating Ferndale Moves to more of a Ferndale Plans website, where you would click on it and you would have the master land use plan, you would have the transportation plan, you would have the Parks and Recs plan, and the process would be standardized. So anybody who wanted to know about anything related to planning in the city of Ferndale would go there first.
How does that help with reaching underserved populations?
Well, I'm not saying it does, but it certainly reaches a much broader population than the standard planning process.
And come to City Hall and
Yeah.
push around
Yeah.
dots.
If you want to get at the majority of people, we strongly believe that there's been a paradigm shift, that the majority of people negotiate a website much easier than they come to the library and use the Dewey Decimal System now. We believe the general public and the majority of people now negotiate Ferndale Moves much easier than they would ever know how to come find the master land use plan at City Hall and understand land use.
Does that mean that maybe part of the process is a room full of tablets or some sort of other public interactive experience where people who don't have this at home have it mediated? Yeah, whether it's computers or tablets or on their phones or something.
Input process inherently is inaccessible to some segment of the population. We believe that what we've done with the website now reaches the majority. How to reach the folks that don't is the same problem we've always had with charrettes and people who can't get there, and public transportation that doesn't go to places. And I mean, inherently there's always a problem. We believe it doesn't mean everybody has to agree, and we're testing the theory that doing it through a website does nothing but increase accessibility over the standard process. It doesn't mean there's not flaws in it. It doesn't mean that people it does make it less accessible to a certain segment of the population. But we feel now we're much more accessible than we used to be. And that if we do the master land use plan this way, we're going to be more accessible than if we do it the standard way.
I think I agree with most of what you just said, but not as a sole source of it. I think the website should be a great supplement to it, not its entirety.
But we have to.
Maybe we could have a summary sheet of each chapter some way. So rather than the whole plan, you just have if you're going to 80 pages, you would have 8 summary sheets of the key components, and that would be something that would be accessible. I mean, you're still providing the type of information of the values and the vision and some key elements, but I mean, there's definitely ways to make a combo hybrid approach, but that's 75% more website, but there's 25%.
The website does not preclude creating printed material. Yeah. But what we did with the original website with the transportation plan, we came to the conclusion very early in the process that trying to do it half each way, you get half a quality project each way. That unless you're committed to doing it one way, the best way possible, you end up with, I don't want to say half-assed, but you end up with lesser quality versions of either one. And that you can't, if the transportation plan and the multimodal plan was meant to be a test to see if it works. So far we've been pretty pleased with how it works, but ultimately it's up to you guys in City Council whether that's the direction we want to go in. The master land use plan is a much different animal than a specific transportation plan. It carries the weight of law. It's what the zoning ordinance is based on. It's required by the Michigan, the Zoning Enabling Act. It's a different animal and a different question to do that with the city's land use than it is the transportation network. We think it's been received well enough and that the progress has been good enough that it's worth considering, and would ask you guys to look at that as not just the standard for the transportation plan, but for all planning projects that happen in the city. So that you could see a project in the plan on the website, and then, the Ferndale Avenue shops is a perfect example. You could see the parcel on the website, and then we would post the site plans when it was coming through the planning process on that website. They would be able to review the plans, comment on the plans, without having to follow the project either by coming to City Hall or coming to public meetings. We envision that type of website having these potentially YouTube clips of these meetings where the projects are approved. But being all in with this type of public access to the process. We don't know if it's going to work, but we're at least considering evolving it. So, and that might be something else that would be included in an RFP. So we haven't made a decision whether we think it would work yet, but we'd like you guys to spend some time, serious time with Ferndale Moves, and then look at it and come back to us and tell us whether you think this would work for other processes or this kind of evolution. So,
Is it as simple as broadening how we market that it's out there? Because, I mean, I don't even know how many people would necessarily know that you go to the library to find it anyway. And so there's a point in saying that, yeah, it's on the web, but if you don't know that it's there, you're not going to look for it in the library or on the web anyway.
Well, yeah, so here's the question. Rather than holding, 3 public forums over 9 hours or so, do we proactively seek out a Ferndale seniors meeting, a PTA meeting, X, Y, and Z, and in that same
public input,
in that same amount of time, get a more targeted, and you can kind of reach out to the African American Parent Network and the University High School PTA. Like, if you really wanted to really specifically target people, rather than invite them here. Using that same amount of, if you've only got a certain window of time.
Yeah, and the answer to that is yes, specifically during the public input process.
Because if it's electronic, you just take it with you.
Well, I'd also like to point out that the same plan is available on a computer at the library as it is on the shelf. So if you don't have access to it, it's just as easy to go to the library and have a librarian show you how to access the plan on the computer as it is to come to City Hall and get it. Plus, it's online. I mean, plus it's out there for everybody. You don't have, if you do a search on Ferndale Transportation or Transportation Planning, you're not just going to get a PDF document that you have to scroll through. You're going to get everything in that more, and this is where Hank's been a huge impact, in a more navigatable website format as opposed to having to scroll through a textual PDF.
Which is my mom's comfort level.
Yeah.
Right? Scrolling through a PDF or website. So I'm going to do my own experiment this weekend and make my mom look at Ferndale Moves. And even if you can access it on a library computer and read something, that's different than
don't get me wrong.
Following.
I believe your mom won't like Ferndale Moves as much as she likes the PDF, but we believe she's now in the minority. And that the idea of public participation and access to plans should be tailored to the majority.
Where's our population statistics here?
It's outdated.
I just wanted to mention that
It's got the SEMCOG website, bring it.
Ferndale Moves was made without a dedicated website budget, basically. I mean, having gone through that process, this is a bootstrap website. So I'm happy that everyone likes it, but this is not the best the money can buy. If you were to go the route of a website with a master land use plan, it would not be hard at all to make major improvements to how the website is accessed, how accessible it is. It would be very easy to make certain recommendations to make it better accessible for the public, to make it so that it's easier to understand, so that it's easier to access on a mobile phone. It is a responsive website. A lot of people talking about underrepresented groups do access the internet on their phones. That's something that I considered. But if it is, do look at Ferndale Moves, do think about it, but it wouldn't be replicating Ferndale Moves. Hopefully, and my recommendation would be that there would be some funds to make it a little nicer, to go the extra mile, and
yeah, we couldn't do it without a commitment, a departmental commitment budget. There's no way you can take a master land use plan and make it permanent without having some ongoing strategies. We do have a website budget now. This will be migrated to be a component of our website. It will look
Our median
different.
age went up. This came from
But we already have some of those tools. The question is this well enough received to create that permanence? And we don't know the answer yet. We're only about halfway through the transportation plan and only considering it for the rest of the plan.
We are getting older.
Do we have any knowledge of whether that would be adoptable? I know you said you talked to the city attorney a little bit. Do we have any guidance at all? Is that even possible?
Certainly possible.
Has
Anything
anyone done it that we know of?
No.
I haven't read about it in any document.
No. No, we don't believe so. I won't lie, that's part of the appeal. No, I don't think anybody's done it. I can't speak. We haven't researched it all across the country. We're concerned with whether it's, and what we talked to the city attorney about, and he certainly will tell us that it's possible, but what he's looking into, is it defendable? Does it leave us open to challenge if we adopt it as part of a website as opposed? And so far the answer is really no. As long as you follow the process, as long as you follow the Enabling Act, and follow that reviewable, component from surrounding communities and everything else. So far, the answer has been we believe it's every bit as defendable as the standard planning process. But until someone tests it, there's no way anybody's going to be able to look at you and say there's, that's laws based on case law more than anything else. So.
And do we have any data, or can we easily get, like you talked about how no one's ever come here and asked for to see the master plan, like from the library or anywhere else that it would be? I mean, if no one's asked for it ever,
website hits,
then I wouldn't so much worry about it not being there.
Well, we can track how many times it's been hit, especially on the new website now. We can tell you immediately.
I'm sure that's the main source.
Yes.
The website.
So I'm saying if that's the larger percentage, then
I'm
moving in
guessing
that direction
99%
would
of the
make
people
sense.
who access our master land use plan right now probably access it online.
Yeah.
And that's
it's just a comfort level, like
it's a PDF level.
Yeah, Kate said between whether you want to scroll through a PDF or whether you want to have a navigable website.
Well, and I mean, as much as the final product, I'm also thinking about that participatory process. And do you read something, or do you have to move around and click on things in order to read something?
Don't you have to, I mean, to get there in the first place, you've got to do some navigation to even get to that PDF. So you've got to have a certain
in order
level
to
of skill.
participate in Ferndale Moves, you have to,
Right.
follow around and read. And I love it. I think it's really cool. I look forward to going home and playing with it. It's going to be really cool. And my niece, my 5-year-old niece, could probably do it better than her grandpa. Right? Would my dad have ever come to a public meeting? No, but my mom.
I mean, there's no question. I mean, and especially when you deal with the master land use plan, we will have to have static or live public comment. I'm confident with the transportation plan in this, we will have to produce some type of executive summary or some type of document that's obtainable. It may include a set of instructions on how to use the website, which we've kicked around that idea. The master land use plan is different. We have to make sure we're right if we're going to do it. I believe in that. I mean, it's made many of us in this room have or will make a career out of that kind of master land use plan foundation along with zoning ordinances, and it's got to represent your community. But to tell you the truth, if your 5-year-old niece can navigate it, that's encouraging, because that's the audience we want. And we want them to think about planning in Ferndale different than they would in other communities. And if we can make that appealing to them at ages as young as 5, then we've probably done exactly what we're hoping to do.
I love the living document idea and about the other things that you can append to the website. And Sherilyn started such a great trend with the technology that she put in place to index, record, index, make searchable all of the council content and now the planning commission content. And this just seems like a natural extension of that. I think it's awesome. It's the participatory part that I guess I'm concerned in as we're crafting it, making sure that as many people as possible can use it.
We're just, and I'm not even sure. I kind of threw it out there and wasn't even sure we were going to. It kind of was dependent on how the rest of the conversation went. So think about it, and we'll be back to talk about it more before we go any farther, certainly. Anything else for us?
I think we have a lot of exciting things going on. You all are very busy, obviously, as we should be as well.
And I can't tell you
really
from,
cool.
I mean, and the Planning Commission knows this from the representatives we've had on the Planning Commission to you guys. These guys have done more work on this stuff than I can describe in this short period of time. So both Hank and Martha's only been here a little bit. Hank's had to suffer through me and educate me on what a website should look like and how it can work and how to build it from the ground up. And I know it was extraordinarily frustrating at times because
We almost went backwards several times because I was afraid, and it's only because, you know, Hank was able to show tangibly by building it herself what was capable that we even made it this far. So, and I don't think we certainly wouldn't be here talking about the master plan this soon if Martha hadn't joined us. So I just want to acknowledge that. It's been a joy, and it's hopefully they're going to be here through both processes. If they leave, I don't know how soon we'll be back.
Well, that was next time my question. We have 2 planning staff people, 2 planning interns.
They're part-time. They're part-time.
Part-time staff.
Part-time staff.
That's on a permanent budget? That's on a temporary budget? That's
at least through May?
I'm squeezing it out of my budget. I will endeavor to keep them as long as they're willing to stay. We don't pay them anywhere near what their skills would dictate in the open market. They're both, and they can speak for themselves, they're both finishing master's degrees.
Can we get Como's to give them free pizza or something?
We try to do the little things. We try very hard to do the little things. So, yes, they're horribly underpaid for the quality of work they provide the city. So,
well, thank you.
That's very fair to say.
Great job, ladies. I love having two smart
over here.
processes.
They represent the city very well. We have no apprehension sending them anywhere to represent the community, and that's a huge bonus when you are short-staffed. I think everybody knows that at this stage. So it's not just sitting at a desk. They're very competent in the public. They represent the city at steering committees and other meetings. They do it. Not just them, but our previous intern, Steve Wiltse, who you didn't get a chance to meet, who's now in Boston, and Michelle Foster before that, who many of you know. I've been very lucky that there's so many people interested in working here because of what we are at least willing to talk about doing in both planning and in community development. So.
I still maintain that we're lucky that you were interested in working here.
Well, it's because of the work everybody did that my wife and I stayed here. If not for that, I wouldn't have been.
Okay, so any other final master land use plan discussion comments? Otherwise, call the audience. Administrative items, I don't know if that was kind of your administrative.
It was.
I just have 2 quick questions. Just, I know we're meeting on Thursday nights now because of the court building. Do we know how long that's projected to go through? I'm just trying to plan ahead.
The court building is probably through the spring at least.
And then we were the second Wednesdays of the month before that?
Yes, it was, it would have been normally.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay. And then do we know, I know when we met last, we were supposed to have the company on Livernois. We've given direction about they're not. Yeah, are they moving forward? I know they were going to do a public hearing.
They indicated they're still going to apply for the conditional rezoning. We haven't received an application yet.
Gotcha. Okay. Anything on the horizon for January that's exciting that we should think about over Christmas?
Not that I'm aware of right now, no. I mean, there are, I will say that
yes, but I can't tell you yet.
The speed and the amount of folks who are interested here, either through speculation or other, anybody who works in this, anywhere near this, knows it's picking up. I would expect people to be coming and talking about projects very soon. So if density and height is in the downtown is extraordinarily important, you might want to consider asking us to have some type of requirement at least to look at in the short term prior to the master land use plan being done. I think we are going to see projects. We're going to see new projects, redevelopment projects, public-private partnerships, all over the city, not just in downtown. But
we can ask you for that right now if you would like.
Like I said, if it's important that to start that discussion, you don't have to wait for the master land use plan to be done.
We need to start the discussion.
Well, we can have an ordinance drafted and bring it back in January or maybe February at the latest that deals with required density.
And some real, whether we pay someone to come in or just some research or something, like some real meaty pro and con.
We can do that.
It's like we got to get some back and forth pro and cons something.
Well, we can do it. We can do it in a way that the information we gather for the ordinance will help lead to the master land use plan or feed into it as well. So we can do that.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, I guess with that, we adjourn at 5 to 10 with no actual items. That was a long
Well, we debated whether to do it in 2 meetings, and we kind of one long meeting was better than 2.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for bearing with us.
Yeah. So I have just I don't say a picky question, a specific question about. So I made a comment on the map and then I don't think it was addressed anywhere. So I'm not sure if it was just like a stupid comment that was addressed through like